Hey everyone, guess what? We do not have ugly swag. We have spaced out radio gear that you're going to want to wear. Why? Because no one wants to wear ugly clothing. So head on over to spacedoutradio.com and go shopping today. You'll be glad you did. And it's a great way to support our show. Once you get your gear, send us a picture of you rocking out in your SOR swag. spacedoutradio.com, shop there today, and make yourself look good. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show with me, your host, Mr. Rob G. It's going to be a fantastic show tonight. We have Canadian UFO researcher Victor Viggiani joining us again right here on the After Hours radio show. Glad to have him back. It's going to be an awesome show for hours 1 and 2. Also, you know, we're going to have Steve Stockton Tells and Told Miss Person Mysteries, Drew Banky coming in hour 3. Let me go ahead and take a look out there, see who is coming first. We have, courtesy of Race Fan, it looks like Kitty Catty Whack with the gold tonight. We have Kira with the silver, and then we have Race Fan with the bronze. I'm not used to saying that. It should be Race Fan with the gold, but tonight is Race Fan with the bronze. Definitely glad to see you guys coming in bright and early. Appreciate you guys doing that for us here. Let's go ahead and go back and see who else has joined us here on the show. Looks like we do have Tim James sighting out there. Appreciate you showing on up. Getting ready for episode 4, Flight 21. Stay safe out there, guys. If you run into the big guy, tell him I said hi. Let's see, who else do we have? We got David Norenberg. Hey, Dave, how's everyone doing? It's nice to see Rob is back this weekend. Yeah, we're back. We're back in effect. Last week, graciously, was Father's Day, right? There's a lot of fathers involved here in these shows that we do, and I hope you all had enjoyed your Father's Day weekend, because I know I did. So shout out to everyone who had fun that weekend. Let me see who else is here. We have Roger Murray dropping some knowledge. 78th anniversary of the Maury Island, or Maury Island, I would think, UFO incident. Awesome stuff there, Roger Murray. Thanks for keeping us informed. We got Mel WD-40, of course, getting this lubed up, ready to get into the show tonight here on the After Hours radio show. Who else do we have out there? Flat 6. I saw him. There he is right there. Flat 6 in the building. Thanks for coming up. Road Blair as well. Thanks for coming in, saying hi, Rob. We got Andrew in Gnomes Trucking saying, I'm here somewhere. LOL. Hey, thanks for coming in, Andrew. Thanks for showing up. We have, who else? Super Crazy Movie Geek. Yes. Okay, aliens. You can start intervening. No need to wait. Hey, I'm with you, and maybe we'll talk about that tonight. Crazy, crazy, crazy world we live in. Eternity Eternal, I see you out there. Thanks for showing up. Bada bing, bada bing, bada boom, bada bing. Thanks for coming on in here tonight. We also have Paranormal Paul. Hi, everyone. Thanks for showing up. Let me see. Can I get to the end? Maybe so. Hillbilly Herb, I see you out there. Thanks for coming in. And I'll reply back to you there. Thanks for reaching out. We got Green Eye Lady out there. Thanks for showing up here. Kitty Catty getting started with the super chat. Thanks. Appreciate your support. Spaced Out Radio. Let's see. I'm not going to get to everybody. I'm not. Jeez, I can't believe this. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the podcast side started in, and then I'll get to you guys, I promise, on the break. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours Radio Show with me, your host, Mr. Rob G. Tonight, we're going to have an awesome show. We have Victor Viggiani, Canadian UFO researcher, joining us for hours 1 and 2. We have Drew Banky with the After Hours wrap-up, and Steve Stockton tells and told Mr. Person Mysteries, and potentially some UFO and weird news right here. After Hours Radio Show, guys, let's get ready to go right about now. Greetings, space travelers. Welcome home. You just tuned your dial to Spaced Out Radio, the only place where you can own the night. I am your host, Mr. Rob G. Tonight, we'll be broadcasting to you on our terrestrial affiliates across North America, plus digitally on digital platforms all around the world. Don't forget, you can access the archives absolutely free. YouTube.com/The Spaced Out Radio. While you're there, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to follow us on X and Instagram at Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Radio Show. Our website is still spacedoutradio.com, where the options are endless. You can stay up to date with the SWR Newswire. You can get yourself some official Spaced Out swag. Plus, rock out to the man you hear right there, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thaw, and oh so much more. We're going to have a fantastic show. We have Victor Viggiani, Canadian UFO researcher. We'll be talking Canadians for Disclosure, hours 1 and 2. Drew Banky tells and told Mr. Person Mysteries, hour 3, along with Steve Stockton, Drew Banky with that hours wrap up. We're going to go ahead and get ready to jump right on into the show. It's going to be great, right? So let me go ahead and not delay, because we don't delay right here, and bring in our guest for the night, Mr. Victor Viggiani, who is, before you say hello to everyone, a retired school principal from Toronto, holds a BA in Sociology and Psychology from New York University and a Master's in Educational Administration from Brown University. 40 years of research into anomalous aerial phenomena, has investigated UFO sightings, counseled individuals with related experiences, and contributed to journalism and presentations on ETI Disclosure. Facilitated the appearance of former Canadian Minister of Defense Paul Hellyer at the University of Toronto in 2005, acted as his media liaison. Currently, he serves as news director for ZlandCommunications NewsNetwork, or ZNN, Canada's sole UFO disclosure focused news service. Thanks for joining us once again, Victor. How are you? I think I got you muted there. Yep, go ahead and hit your mute. Okay, looks like you are muted. You should be able to unmute from your end. Live radio, guys. This is how it goes sometimes, right? It doesn't always go flawless. There's always, sometimes the gremlins come out to play when it comes to live radio and presentation, as we wait for our guest here to get his button undepressed. We'll go ahead and get ready to get you guys ready for what we're going to do today, right? It's going to be awesome.
Here.
Once we get him, which we got him now, great. Okay, we are here, Victor. How are you? And
just fine. Thank you very much. I apologize for hitting the wrong button.
It is totally okay. It happens. Believe me, live, you can't always be perfect. So with that being said,
well, I used to be perfect, but now I'm much better. So it's okay.
There you go. I like that. I might have to coin that as well, use that phrase. So with that being said, this is like the third time you've been here, and I always look for people that are going to bring awesome conversations and are doing things to help move the needle, which you are with this Canadians for Disclosure. Can you kind of take us back, though? What kind of got you into this? What made you even begin to consider creating this?
Well, it goes back to 1975, Rob, and I read a book by Jacques Vallée, Revelations. And before that, I must admit that I had absolutely no interest. This is back in 1975 while I was teaching school here in Toronto. And I was at a bookstore and I picked up this book. I just randomly picked it up because it was in a bookstore. And I read the book back at my cottage that same afternoon. And I finished it within about a day and a half or so. And then I figured out, my goodness, it was all about Jacques Vallée's take on UFOs. And at the time, it was a little bit avant-garde, but I think I started well ahead of the curve. And I couldn't quite understand completely, because I had no background in it, exactly what he was trying to get at. So I read the book that summer while I was at the cottage, and I read it 2 more times before I figured out what this guy was talking about. And I guess I'll probably repeat this probably 2 or 3 more times during our interview, but I read the book, and when I finished reading the book the 3rd time, I said to myself, how long has this stuff been going on, and why don't I know about it? And because it's such a big issue. And that's really what got me involved in it. And just after that, I began to become involved with MUFON Canada, up here in Canada, in Toronto. And then from there, meeting many people, getting involved with abductees, experiencers, and research groups, and really realizing that there was definitely something going on in our skies that no one really understood. And it's the same thing that's happening today. But that's what got me involved to begin with. And I got to realize that this issue wasn't just about funny lights in the sky. It was about the lies on the ground, the way that we were being lied to by our government, lied to by the media at the time, and all the lies that perpetrated itself right through our political systems, our intellectual systems, our journalistic systems, our media systems. And there was just a whole menagerie of denial going on at the time. And that was prevalent when I first got into it. And I must say, subsequent to that, for about another 20 or 30 years. But after being part of a radio broadcast system here in Toronto on CFRB with Strange Days Indeed, with the late Errol Bruce Knapp, we got to interview virtually, Rob, everyone who was anybody in the UFO field back then, from about 1985 until the early 2000s, when the show ended. I'm talking about people like Danny Sheehan and Steve Bassett and Stan Friedman, and you name it, and we interviewed those people. And those are the people that provided us with the background as to how the government was sequestering all this information, and we got a very firm grasp on the idea that this stuff was being held back from the general public in ways that we could never even imagine, and how deep the secrecy went to a level of sequestration with black governments and so on and so forth. So that's how I got involved, and that's how we're continuing this fight up here in Canada for disclosure, which we'll probably undoubtedly get into as the program progresses.
Ah, that is awesome. And I know you said something earlier there where you said when you had the realization that this was a real thing, it kind of hit you. Your response was like, how long has this been going on and what are they doing about it? And it was funny because that's the same reaction I had when the realization hit. And it's like, wait a minute, this is crazy. This is momentous moment. Like, and you look around and you wonder why it isn't being addressed in basically addressed, and it bothered me, and that's what drives me to kind of do what I do as well. So
yeah,
with
precisely.
that being said, I read your bio there and the intro here, and it stated that you're the news director for ZlandCommunications NewsNetwork, Canada's sole UFO disclosure focused news site. So the question I had about that was, why do you think that you're the only news site doing this in Canada?
Well, I'm pretty aware and alert to anything that's Canadian with respect to the UFO issue. There are a lot of researchers, here in Canada, people on the East Coast and in the West Coast, and in the middle provinces of Canada. Many researchers who do a lot of different things. They write articles and present sighting reports and so on and so forth. But there is literally no one in the entire country of Canada. I'm talking, population of 40 million people. There is no news service that deals with the disclosure issue, and with the point of being that it's a news item and no one's talking about it. It's not on CBC here in Canada. It's not on global television or global news. It's not on CP24. It's not on any of the news networks in Canada at all. There is literally no one. There is no news outlet here in Canada, be it major, minor, or in the middle, that deals with UFO disclosure, and that's what ZLand Communications does. So if people listening right now want to go over to ZLand Communications, just Google that, ZLand Communications blogspot.com, and you'll get a really refreshed idea as to the kinds of things that we consider news with respect to the disclosure issue. And nobody else is doing it. And that's why I feel it's very important that this be done, and that it's absolutely essential that Canadians pay attention to the issue. And that's why we call it the only Canadian news service that deals with UFO disclosure.
Wow. You going back to, again, the statement, you're wondering what they're doing about this. How do you feel Canada has dealt with the UFO situation, maybe even compared to other countries around the world?
Does the word zero ring a bell with you?
Okay, yeah, definitely.
That's a good place to start. No, Canada is completely the Canadian government. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
The Canadian government is completely absent, missing in action with respect to their propagation or even any kind of dialogue, discourse, or narrative about the UFO issue. There's absolutely no Canadian governmental dialogue going on with the Canadian people about how the Canadian government has had a long history back as far as 1952 with their involvement with the UFO issue. There is absolutely nothing on the floor of the House of Commons. We run a parliamentary system here, Rob, and the parliamentary system is such that the members of parliament are elected. There's 343 seats, and the governing body, which happens to be the Liberal Party at this point in time, with probably about 171 or 72 seats, they are the governing body with the other Conservative Party, New Democratic Party, and the Quebecois parties. The Liberal parties are in charge of the government at this point in time. And that's traditionally how things work with our elections. But at no point in the Canadian history of the House of Commons has a question about UFOs been placed before the House of Commons during question period or in any bills or legislation. They've dealt with this issue in an absolutely zero-minded way. They have no idea what's going on, at least the members of Parliament don't. And thus, in turn, the media does not take it seriously. And thus, in turn, the elected, the people who elect the government have no idea about what the government is doing. So with respect to it. But on the other side of that, on the deep backside of this, we know, and we have thousands of files that prove that the Canadian government since 1952 has had a deep involvement with over 9,500 files. And that's only the beginning part of it with the UFO issue. But this is something that the Canadian government has not let loose on the Canadian public. There's no dialogue about it. And there's been some very, specific attempts at doing it by several MPs, but they've reached what I call the glass ceiling. And there's stuff that they get out there on their own in terms of media, perhaps, or their own submissions to the public and the media. But there's been no governmental action on dealing with how Canada has been involved with the UFO issue in the past. And that is something that we want to change at Canadians for Disclosure.
Wow. And I'm just thinking about that when I looked into this before, the 9,500 documents on UFOs specifically.
Oh, 9,500.
I'm sorry, I didn't say that. 9,500, 9,500. Yes.
That's right.
Okay. Documents, which is an outrageous amount of documents, especially when they're not speaking about it public facing. But the thing I was tripping over was, okay, they release these archives or declassify them, but they still don't talk about it. Do they even acknowledge the documents, being that they're declassified at this point?
The quick answer is that they, being the government has never publicly acknowledge that these files exist. I found the files. There's a bit of a story behind this. I found the files myself back in 2010, and they've been on Library and Archives Canada for many, many years. They've accumulated over the years, and they're segmented into 4 or 5 different sections. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police have their own UFO files. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police is similar to, I guess, would be the CIA in America. Okay, and there's also the Department of Transport, which deals with a lot of different issues with respect to the UFO issue, and also to the Department of Defense. So these are all segmented, and each one of them has their own set of UFO files. And why and how they got to be put into Library and Archives Canada, I'm not aware of how and why they did that. But these files were discovered by me by ZlandCommunications NewsNetwork back in 2010. No one knew that they were there. They were there for anyone to access, but it was never acknowledged that these things were actually there. And when I found them, I sent out a press release about it, and I was severely criticized for doing it because people felt that, my goodness, this has been out there for a long time. I said, yes, indeed, they have been out there for a long time, but no one knows about this. The government's not making it public. The government is not acknowledging that these things are there. So I made a very big deal about it in terms of how people can actually access it and why the government did not go out of their way to make these files public. And there's a reason for that, and we can get into that a bit later in terms of how the Canadian government is controlled in the way they deal with and release information about UFOs.
One thing I did hear you say before, I was years ago, you said the U.S. and Canada have engaged in conversations about UFOs and what to do about them. What do you think that conversation looks like? And, being that obviously they're both connected to NORAD, who is watching the skies at all times. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
How they're connected, you mean?
Yeah, how the Canadian government is, are they playing background and allowing the U.S. to just take the lead on the issue? Because there's so much evidence there in those archives, it would seem that might be the case.
Well, it all goes back to one of the memos that I think eventually you'll probably show. One of the memos, I believe, is by A.G. Langley, one of the Intelligence Committee officials. And what A.G. Langley did is he published a memo indicating that, and among several other issues, that what the Canadian government needed to do at the time, because of all of the amorphous or the unbelievable aspects of this back in 1952, that what the Canadian government chose to do at that time when Langley released this memo was to follow the policy of the United States Air Force at the time to not deal with the issue. The United States Air Force was the first entity within the American, military kind of system to placate and to downplay the UFO issue. The United States Air Force wanted nothing to do with the UFO issue. They did not publicize anything. They gave no credibility to the UFO issue at all since 1952. And then once the Canadian government began finding out more about the UFO issue, they realized that they had a choice to make. And they made the choice to not deal with the UFO issue and follow the policy of the United States Air Force to play down, and that's in the memo directly that we can look at a little bit later on, to play down the issue of UFOs at any cost. And that was then and has been the policy of the Canadian government since 1952, to play down the issue of UFOs, and it still rings true today.
Is there any sort of path? I'm not obviously versed on how the Canadian government is structured, but the same way we currently have garnered support from our Congress and to kind of form task force, we kind of had to do it over time. Is that something that's achievable in Canada, do you think? Or is this just going to be something they refuse to touch ever?
Well, it's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that question. The two, first of all, let me start by saying that the two government systems, the way we govern ourselves up here in Canada and the way you guys are governed in the United States is completely different. We have a much more at the grassroots level. We have a much more responsive governmental system. Our as I tried to explain earlier, our parliament is made up of 343 seats. That means that across Canada, members of parliament are elected to the government in all the different parties. You guys have just two parties. We have three dominant parties: the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the New Democratic Party, and also the Quebecois party. So there's four parties, but the Liberals are the dominant party, and the lead person in that government, which is Mark Carney. He is the Prime Minister of Canada. So he is the person who speaks for the government and is the leading faction within the Liberal government. So that's how the government works. So what happens is that anything that happens to come before Parliament is dealt with in a whole lot of ways, committees and so on. And some of our systems are similar in that way. But what happens if the government does not want to deal with an issue, they will be able to put down, delay, sequester, or whatever you want to call it, any kind of issue that is not in the interest of the government as a whole or the Liberal Party. And that's what has happened traditionally and historically within the government of Canada. Although these files are there, the government from back in 1952 and all the way through now has never admitted that these files existed. They never talked about it on the floor of the House of Commons. They've never debated it on the floor of the House of Commons. They have never opened up a committee or any committees, plural, about UFOs within the government. They've done nothing with respect to that. And that's how I guess our government differs from the way the American government has worked over the last probably since 2017 in bringing forward in Congress and Senate different kinds of committees of oversight to deal with the UAP issue. Nothing like that exists in Canada. It can exist. It might exist if we put pressure on the Canadian government, but right now there is absolutely zero committee work or zero discussion, zero narratives on the floor of the House of Commons to ask the kind of questions that are similar to what's happening in the United States Congress, Senate, and the House of Representatives. So that's how we differ. And right now there's a big cork on this, on the lid of this whole issue. And that's the cork that we want to take out of the bottle.
And I understand that you want to get the Canadian citizenship kind of, going and together on this issue to kind of demand that sort of transparency. Is there a pathway to that? So say you get a good group of people, you're starting to get ears in Canada. Is there a pathway to getting
absolutely? Yeah, absolutely. And what let me be very clear with this. And I know my colleagues, Kate Chassé, who's one of the directors of Canadians for Disclosure, and our senior advisor, Craig Whitten. The three of us are the leadership team for Canadians for Disclosure. And the three of us are working very, very hard to assemble a group of Canadian citizens who want to bring this issue forward in their own constituency. So let me elaborate on that. So what we're trying to do here, Rob, is of the 343 seats in the House of Commons, each MP, let's say each representative, is elected to his or her own constituency, and we have people from in the Canadian citizenry, people in these 343 seats. And what we're trying to do is assemble. We already have about 65 or 70 individuals willing to meet with their own MPs in their constituency. We don't want to go before the government. We don't want to establish committees just yet. We don't want to have any kind of big deal in the House of Commons. All we want is to assemble as many Canadians as possible in all of these 343 constituencies to meet with their MPs. And we are going to be providing.
Okay, yeah, hold it right there, Victor.
We'll come back in a minute, I guess. Okay.
Right here on Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show. Make sure you guys come right back if you go anywhere. We'll be back with more conversation. See you in a minute. All right, we are clear. And yeah, sorry I had to cut you off there. If you could finish that thought on the other side of the break, that'd be awesome. And let me just say, Richard Minnick, do appreciate your support of Space Out Radio. Disclosure has already happened, I say. Some ways it has. I understand what you mean by that. Let's see who else is here. 11 is in the building. Ross Coulthard said Canadian scientists are working on UFO stuff for Americans in a Jesse Michaels interview released today. Interesting. Very possible. Very possible. I'll go ahead and tag that. Maybe we'll talk about that later. Let's see who's out there. Woo Riders DG. Hard to see Canadian leadership being okay with disclosure coming out. That's the code that has to be cracked. That's what Victor's doing. So we're going to talk more about that. Let's see. Simply Coco, thanks for coming on in. Our host Rob G, LOL. Yes, our host Rob G, right here in the building on the Space Out Radio After Hours Radio Show. Glad to see you come on in here tonight. Blue Cruise testing 1 2 3. The live chat is still alive. Testing complete. Yes, thanks for coming on in. Appreciate showing on up. Blue Cruise, Tyler 420 as well. Thanks for coming in. Amy WC, I missed you earlier. Thanks for showing up here. Let's see. I know there were a few other people I didn't say hi to. Attorney to the EBEs. Victor's a great guest. I definitely agree with that. And let's see. Who else do we have? Jeff Garvey was saying Victor's a cool cat. Affirmative. Let's see. Who else do we have? I think that might Paranormal Paul. Thanks for coming in. And Wes W. Decker. Okay, I'm almost missed you, sir. Thanks for coming on in here tonight. And I think that was probably it. Let's see. Yeah. Yep, that was it. Thanks for coming in, guys. Thanks for showing up. Oh, Robert Lamar Jr., I'm sorry. You came in just at the last minute. So did Dead Fish Cheese Spread. Okay, now we're current. Don't make me a liar, guys. All right, we got about 2.5 minutes here. So, yeah, obviously we don't want to talk about what we're going to talk about, but how have things been just in general, Victor, out there in Canada? How's the weather? How you been?
Oh, the weather's heating up for our summer. It's June. It's probably June, July, and part of August. Those 3 months, we get a fairly decent summer, but that's about it. After that, it goes south or goes north. Actually, very cold after that. So, so it hasn't been too bad. Yeah.
I know Dave has been out in the woods lately, filming with.
Dave is always in the woods.
Yeah, and I was noticing that it stays daylight all the time right now. Is that where you're at in the season?
No, we don't have. We're not that far north. No, we're in Toronto. We're very close to Detroit and all the 49th parallel. No, it's dark right now up in the north, in Nunavut and all of the northern parts of Canada. There is preponderance of daylight pretty much all day, but right now we're experiencing the same kind of daylight and nighttime as you guys are. Where are you located?
I'm down Bakersfield, California, right about an hour north of Los Angeles.
We get the same kind of night and day as you do. It's the same thing. It's not much different. But up north in Canada, way up north, there is a preponderance of light pretty much all day at this time of the year. Right now, it's the same as you.
Yeah, sometimes I wish I could trade weather with you because it's super hot here. It's been over 100 degrees Fahrenheit out here. Last couple of days has been pretty cool, but we're going back up, I think, tomorrow.
Right now, this coming week, we will be in the 90s here in Toronto.
90s Fahrenheit. Wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's pretty hot. That's pretty hot.
That's what we get during the summer. It's very short lived, but during the wintertime, it's just the opposite.
Wow. Interesting. I always wanted to go to Canada. I used to go up to Seattle all the time, doing back in my music days, Another Life. But I used to be right there by the Canadian border all the time. I was like, I'm going to go over. And never did. You
should come over and stay.
Yeah. Hey, Victor, I considered
I
it.
don't want to get into that one just now.
Right, right. But I think you know. I think you know. I know. You know. You know. I know.
Let's put
But
it at this point right now. I am afraid to cross the border at this point, and many Canadians are literally fearful of crossing the border.
oh my god, I had to watch someone recently on YouTube. I can't remember who it was. It was some political guy, and he said he had gone through these steps to figure out how to get Canadian residency, even though had no plans to go. He just wanted to know what those steps were and what he would have to go through. I was like, that's not a bad idea. Just to know for the knowledge piece, why not? We got about 10 seconds left here.
Okay, you go ahead. You lead the way.
All right. Yep. Mel W40 Bakersfield, home of Buck Owens, corn, and other things. Here we go. All right, everybody. Welcome back. Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show. We are back with our guest, Victor Viggiani, Canadian UFO researcher, trying to get answers, trying to get them to step up to the plate and admit what they know because the archives say so. They have had experience with UFOs. They've known this whole time. They won't say anything. We'll see what we can do to move the needle on that right here as we come back. Also, don't forget to hit that like button as we jump right back into the show. Victor, you were mid-sentence in saying something there at the break. Do you recall where you were? Can you pick it up?
Well, what was I what was I addressing at the time?
I know I asked you which drove this. Was there a pathway? I think you were talking about the group that was formed.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me sort of frame it in a way that people understand. The Canadians for Disclosure is a disclosure group. It's across Canada. We're appealing to Canadian citizens. So let me give you an example of what we're trying to do. We're trying to collect Canadian people in their own ridings, in their own constituencies, to approach their members of parliament. Now, members of parliament are elected in the same way that your senators are and your House of Representatives. It's a very similar kind of process. So I'm living in a constituency, in a riding, where I elect a member of parliament, and his name is Charles Sousa. So I vote, and the people in our riding, which is probably in here in Mississauga, let's say 340,000 people, or whatever it might happen to be, and he is our representative. So everywhere in Canada, the whole country is divided into constituencies, and each constituency has one member of parliament. And what we are asking our people to do is to approach each of their members of parliament in a way that will bring forward the issue of UFOs. So what I have done, if I could break this down into my own personal constituency, and what we're asking members of the Canadians for Disclosure to do, is meet with their member of parliament and discuss with them, set up a meeting with them, and attend constituency meetings to talk about the UFO issue. So what we're going to do is solicit or gather as many Canadians as possible in their individual constituencies to meet with their members of parliament, to sit down with those members of parliament, or attend constituency meetings with each member of parliament. They have a people's group within their riding who sit and talk about issues within that particular riding. And we're going to get individual people to attend those constituency meetings to raise the issue of UFOs. We have strategies to do that and convince the member of parliament that this issue is extremely important, that the Canadian government has to do it. We're not approaching the entire government to do it. I think it's important to realize this. We're not approaching the entire government. We're doing this on an individual basis. So I, as a member of a constituency, okay, as an elector, I would meet with my member and say, listen, here is the issue of UFOs. I would attend the constituency meeting, and we are providing each of our members of Canadians for Disclosure with a 7-step series of approaches, resources that will bring forward all of the documents that we have, that Canada has had a long history in UFOs, and present them with these documents, and along with all the other people at these constituent meetings, to make them realize that the UFO issue is, first of all, very, very complex. And second of all, that the Canadian government, as we talked about earlier, has been hiding this information from the Canadian public. And we want to know from each member of parliament if they are willing to find out more about the UFO issue through our individual citizens, through these tactics and strategies that we have. Do they want to find out more about the UFO issue, or if they want to keep this issue dead under the government's auspices? So that's the decision that people have to make with their members of parliament. So that's what we're doing on a grassroots level. We want to reduce this to one individual in a riding, possibly two if there are others that want to talk about the UFO issue here in Canada. And that's very different than anything that's ever happened in Canada before. This has never been done before, and we're trying to solicit as many members of the Canadian public as possible to do this, to meet with their members of parliament. So that's where we're at in terms of providing MPs with as much information as possible. And that history is a long history. It's amazing how much information these MPs do not know about. And we are convinced that 98.8, 98.9 members of parliament know absolutely nothing, literally nothing about the UFO issue. And that's because the government hasn't discussed it before. The government has never had this as an issue before the government in question period or in any legislation before. So we need to raise that bar so that 98% of these people that are our elected representatives become aware of this. They just don't know about it. So we consider ourselves parents who are raising children. These children, elected members of parliament, know nothing. They're ignorant. They're very immature in their understanding of global issues. Right now, there's a lot of stuff going on. Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. The issues like poverty, housing, the economy, indigenous rights, you name it. There's a lot of stuff going on here in Canada, as it is in the United States, a lot of different issues. But there is one issue that is a global issue that's not being paid attention to. And we know for a fact that the Canadian government needs to pay attention to, first of all, what their response has been to the UFO issue, which has been zero. Although those 9,500 files prove that the Canadian government has had a very deep understanding and deep involvement with the UFO issue. So you can see the dissonance that's happening there. Members of parliament know nothing, but the Canadian government knows everything. You see what I've done?
Yeah, definitely.
The members of parliament know nothing, and they've translated that into keeping all of that information from the Canadian public. We want to eliminate that gap. We want to solve that gap. We want to solve that problem with educating our MPs and saying, listen, there's something going on here that you're not talking about. And if you're not willing to talk about it, that we're going to do something in a very prolific way with the media and other citizens to force you to understand that. But then again, going back to my analogy earlier, we have to consider ourselves as parents. Canadians for Disclosure are parents, educating children who are elected representatives on this issue. They're extremely immature about this issue. And we as parents have to work collaboratively with them to say, come along, little boys and little girls, and we want to tell you something about something that you're completely ignoring. Okay, and that's the way we have to approach these people, because of their naivete with respect to this issue, and many of them don't consider this issue to be anything but just sort of sound bites, or at least reprehensible information about funny lights in the sky. That's where they're at. We have to move them forward into an understanding that we are in fact being visited by a multiple number of off-world civilizations with respect to this UFO issue, and they have no idea that this is occurring. And you and I know, and the people and the thousands of people that are listening right now know, in fact, that the UFO issue is A, real, and B, that we are in fact being visited by any number of off-world civilizations, highly advanced civilizations that are in some instances 3 to 6 billion years old, more intelligent and more advanced than we are. Our Canadian members of parliament know nothing about this issue, and that's where Canadians for Disclosure will step in to educate our members of parliament about that fact.
And that's awesome, because we know that blueprint works that you're talking about here, because we actually did that here in the United States a few years ago. And I got to shout out Lou Jimenez. He's now on the skeptic side, but at once he was on the believer side. And they put together something called a big phone home, where they gathered everyone in the community to and put forth a way for them to send out emails to their constituents. And that worked. That actually helped, I think, get us into now having hearings and it being actually addressed with committees. So it sounds like that would be the same pathway you guys would take there. But like here in America, we have a shadow government technically that mirrors the actual government, and they often step in from time to kind of put up roadblocks to stop us from getting to where we're trying to go. Do you have that problem in Canada?
No, that's a very good point. Let's spend a moment on that, Rob, because that's an excellent point that you've outlined. That irrespective of what your I guess your advocates in the United States have done, there is a pushback force. You call it a shadow government, and that is very, very powerful in the United States. And that's not necessarily something that's a pushback issue with respect to with UFOs. The project for a new American century back in the Reagan era was issued to provide the United States after the fall of the Soviet Union. This policy was brought forward, as I said, during the Reagan era, to maintain or establish what they call full spectrum dominance of the planet. And that meant that in every way, shape, and form that the United States was to attain and retain and establish and maintain their dominance over the planet. And that's what really forced all of the issues globally towards economics, military dominance, etc. That's what drove the United States to become the most dominant power after the fall of the Soviet Union. It's important to understand that this full spectrum dominance ranges over everything. It doesn't matter what it is, politically, economically, and socially. And that's what is the underpinning of this whole suppression of the UFO issue. This project for a new American century was responsible for the suppression, I'll repeat it again, the suppression of the UFO issue. And that's where that played into the prominence of the full spectrum dominance of the United States. In Canada, we sort of, we felt the effects of that dominance. And as a result of that, the Canadian government fell under the umbrella of that project for a new American century, and in a full spectrum way fell in line with the American policy to suppress any and all information about UFOs. So that's what's happening with respect to Canadian, I guess, prominence with respect to this issue. It's nothing that the Canadian government did. What the Canadian government did was fell under the control of the United States government, as did the UK, as did France, as did all, virtually every other, country in the world. They felt that they had to become, I guess, the surrogate to the United States full dominant spectrum with respect to all issues, military, and included in that is the UFO issue. And that is why many countries have been very, very reluctant, if at all, to get involved in the UFO issue. So you must ask yourself the question, why did France, why did the UK, why did Poland, why did South Africa, why did the Netherlands, why did they not release any of their UFO files? Why did they not talk about this in their government? The reason behind it was the project for a new American century that called for full spectrum dominance over every issue. And you know as well as I do that the Americans at the time, back in the 80s and 90s, had the capacity to control governments at a very, very specific level with respect to a number of issues. And the UFO issue was one of them. And that's how Canada fell in line as a policy issue with the American government, not to discuss the UFO issue with their public, to play down the UFO issue. So that gives you sort of an idea as to the full dominant spectrum that the United States and their control had over why the Canadian government, and going back to your question, has not done anything about this. And that's what we want to change.
Now, there was Larry Maguire who pushed for transparency on UAPs. Where did that? Did he get anywhere with that, or what do you? How do you think that played out?
Boy, it's a really Larry Maguire's story is a very great story, but it's a very sad story in some ways. What happened was, to begin with, Larry Maguire was a Canadian MP, a member of Parliament from Manitoba. He was in a constituency. He was elected, just like one of your representatives, in his constituency in Manitoba. Brendan Surrey is the constituency. And he found out somehow, we don't know how he found out this, but somehow to begin with, and I hope your listeners can and viewers can tag along with me on this whole narrative, he found out that some of our nuclear facilities, now I'm not talking about any kind of, military installation, because we do not have any military facilities that have nuclear weapons. We don't have anything up here like that in Canada at all. We do not house nuclear weapons, but we do have nuclear facilities which generate power. Okay, do you understand the distinction there? Yeah. So what he found out was that some of these nuclear facilities that generate power in New Brunswick and Quebec, in Ontario, were being overflown by craft of unknown origin. They were being buzzed by UFOs, basically. Okay. And it wasn't specific to airports. It wasn't specific to any other kind of locality, national parks or anything like that. They were coming into the airspace of our nuclear generating facility. So these nuclear power plants were being buzzed by UFOs. He found this out through some sources that he had, and he made an issue of it. And he met with a deputy minister, which kind of would translate into one of your cabinet ministers in the States. He was in charge of a committee, Larry was, and he addressed this issue with a deputy minister named John Hannaford. So he asked John Hannaford, this deputy minister, are you aware that some of our nuclear facilities are being overflown by UFOs? Are you aware of that? And the minister looked at this, and there's a video of this on my website, and the minister had no idea that this was going on. The answer was no, he did not know about this. And why don't you know about it? Well, I'll have to defer to some other people in my staff. We'll find out more about it. But the question remained unanswered. The deputy minister of natural resources knew nothing about nuclear facilities being overflown by UFOs. Okay. And that's where Larry Maguire began to get more deeply involved in this whole issue, because he raised this issue in several different formats within committees. And what he did was he wrote to the Minister of Defense at the time, Anita Anand, and asked her, do you know anything about UFOs flying over our of our nuclear energy facilities? She knew nothing about it. Okay. And he also wrote letters to different kinds of ministers to ask them the same questions. And no one knew anything about what he knew. And so as a result of that, he was interviewed by CTV, one of the Canadian television networks. It's the second largest one in Canada. And he expressed these concerns with that media outlet. And as a result of that, he caused a quite large kerfuffle about this whole issue with respect to Canadians. But unfortunately, it never reached the limit or reached the extent where it was discussed on the floor of the House of Commons. So it was a great effort by Larry Maguire to do this. He was accepted fully. He went to the Soul Foundation at Stanford University and gave a lecture on this whole issue. But the Canadian government did not pay any attention to what Larry Maguire was doing. So that kind of gives you an indication as to what a member of Parliament knew about UFOs and what he did about UFOs, but they took no action about it.
Yeah.
And it's very significant that the Canadian government would do that, because they are still following that same kind of policy of the United States, and playing down the issue of UFOs. So Larry Maguire was very instrumental about that. And if you go to my website, ZlandCommunications.blogspot.com, you will find out all of the letters that Larry Maguire wrote to all these ministers. It's all laid out there very, very clearly to you as to how Larry Maguire did what he had to do, but it met with a resounding no from the Canadian government.
And and obviously you get more things done when you have a group of people. So that'd be the reason why you want to get
Of
all
course,
those
yes.
together. So his lone voice wasn't able to get it done, but it does show that there was at one point in time a member willing to do something. So that's cool. Now, what I wanted to do real quick is kind of give a little tease, because we're going to be talking about these archives and showing actually some of the paperwork that you pulled from the archives. And I just want to read this, and maybe you can give a brief description about what this is.
Okay.
But just for the impact, guys, because as you heard Victor say, they have an archive of over 9,500 articles that are related to UFOs, and specifically talks about UFOs. You're going to be blown away in the fact that they don't address it. But I'm going to show you here, and I'm going to read this if I can. It is mind-blowing. This is the site that you pulled them from, Libraries and Archives Canada. And this, I'm going to read this here.
Go
this
ahead.
is what you sent me earlier. This one is pulled. It says, you might also consider it advisable to add that should the flying saucer, clearly stated, actually make a landing on Canadian territory, the nearest RCAF command should be advised immediately to telegram or something of the sort. That just says it, and it's there. It came from the government, which is crazy that they would not
give the data.
it.
Give the date on that, Rob. Give the date. It's 1952 on the date of that. Anyways, go ahead.
Wow, no, 1952. I was going to go ahead and let you go ahead and speak to this real quick. We have about 2 minutes before break.
Yeah, so that particular, it's a longer memo, which we can probably possibly show later on. But what it does prove, it doesn't. And notice that they use the word flying saucer. I mean, it's an older terminology, granted, fine. But the fact of the matter is that the Canadian government published this from the director of the Scientific Intelligence, A.G. Langley, and the fact that the Canadian government did this back in 1952 shows us that the Canadian government knew full well what was going on with respect to flying saucers at the time, or UFOs. And then it says in writing, maybe we had better talk when they talk about this later on. Your thoughts on this? So we should talk this over. So it proves that the Canadian government has known about UFOs since 1952. They've known it internally, but they've never brought it forward to the Canadian government. And that's what we're trying to do.
And so I guess maybe explain, what is a director of scientific intelligence? What's the equivalent maybe here in the States?
Oh my goodness. Director of scientific, probably something like the scientific director within the White House. Okay. The White House has a scientific director that advises the president about matters of science. Okay.
Wow.
So that's the level at which this director of scientific intelligence would be functioning at back in 1952. So we have a number of situations currently that the science director in the United States advised Bill Clinton on UFOs. There's his name was Dr. John Gibson, and he advised President Clinton about UFOs. And so this individual, A.G. Langley, would be the similar position here in Canada that may have advised the Prime Minister at the time, which he probably didn't do. I don't think he did. We have no information that he did or didn't. But the fact of the matter, that's the parallel kind of directorship that would be existing here in Canada as the United States.
Wow, very high level, obviously. So now people out there understand how important that name is on there, and so this is 5 years after Roswell, guys. You got to remember that. So this just shows that these type of documents were being handed out in other countries. So likely other countries around the world all have these as well. We're going to go ahead and jump into our break right here at the top of the hour. We'll come back and look at more stuff from the Canadian Archive right here in Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show. See you back after the break.
Conversations that move the needle.
Conversations that move the needle.
You're listening to After Hours with Mr. Rob G on the only place where you can own the night. Spaced Out Radio.
Spaced Out Radio.
You've tuned your dial to the right frequency.
All right, we're clear. Victor, we're going to go off camera for 5 minutes. I'll see you in after the break.
Okay.
All right. All right, everybody. Welcome back, Space Out Radio, the After Hours radio show. After hour number 2 already here. Wow. As we go ahead and get ready to come back from radio here in about 30 seconds. Be patient. Actually, this is the hour for questions. I did see a question or two. I pinned it. Please go ahead and consider putting your questions in all caps so I can see them, kind of differentiate who's asking what, and we'll make sure we ask them at the end of this hour. We got about 15 seconds left here. We come back from break. All right, and here we go. All right, everybody, welcome back. Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show. After hour number 2, back with UFO researcher, Canadian UFO researcher Victor Viggiani. We were actually jumping into some really good stuff, and we are looking at Canadian archives. It's about to get crazy. Make sure you don't go anywhere. If you miss any of this, jump into archives. They're absolutely free. YouTube.com/ at Spaced Out Radio, where the options are endless. Jumping right back into this convo. So, Victor, right before the break, in talking to everyone out there, we just read this, and it's from 1952. Clearly outlines flying saucers. This comes from someone that advises the president, the director of scientific, or they're not president in Canada, but essentially the same thing.
The prime minister, right?
The prime minister, and the director of scientific intelligence. So big stuff, because Roswell happened just 5 years before that, and you would have to assume with this 2 separate countries with the same type of documents out about UFOs that there likely are other countries around the world that have these same things, which means everyone has been dealing with this the entire time. So jumping back into this, we do have other slides here, Victor, and you can speak to these.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Bring the next one up here. These are from, let me go back here, the Library and Archives Canada, which is a place where you can find these documents. And the next one up is this one here. I don't know if you recognize this or can speak to this here.
Well, that is part of a memo. Let me give you the backstory on it. The memo was written by Wilbert Smith, and he was an electrical engineer for the Canadian government, and he was tasked with going to the United States to find out what the United States was doing about the UFO situation, and specifically with reference to the technology that these UFOs were using. Now, if you read through this memo that's before you, it's like any of the other documents that are on Library and Archives Canada. It's very dry reading. It's not something sensational. It's not something, wowing. This stuff was all written back in the 50s. And at the time, there wasn't the appetite that we have right now and the intensity about the UFO issue. It was dealt with in a very subdued kind of way. So Wilbert J. Smith was sent to the United States by the Canadian government to find out what was going on with UFOs, or flying saucers, as they called them back in the 1950s, what was going on. And because he was trying to investigate what the technology was behind these UFOs, he wanted to talk to all of the leading government officials with respect to this issue. So, there's no way that people can read that particular memo that's before you, and you can do it later on, but right now it's not something that you might want to read. But he went through the Canadian and American embassies in the United States, and he met with an official, scientific official called Soldant, and he met with him to find out what the United States government knew about the technologies behind UFO. So if you can go on to the next part of that memo, we can possibly get to that. Okay, that is the ending of the memo, signed by Wilbert de Brocklehouse Smith. And could you go to the next one, possibly?
Yes, definitely. Let me go ahead.
Yeah,
the next one.
No, go back again. No, there we are. No, sorry. Yes, here we are. That's the one I'd like to get to. You see the dark area that's outlined by me in that particular one. If you want to look more closely at that particular at that particular file, what he came back with after consulting with there you go. That's people want to look at that more specifically. He said, I made inquiries about this whole issue with the Canadian embassy, and they were able to obtain the following information. Number one, the matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating higher even than the H-bomb. That's the first thing that he found out from the Canadian embassy with respect to his investigation with the scientific advisor. And B, flying saucers exist. That's the second thing that he found out. And then C, their modus operandi is unknown, but I can't read that word, but a concerted effort is being made by a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush, which is another entirely different story, to find out what this all is all about. And then D, the entire matter is considered by the United States authorities to be of the most high international significance. So this is what Wilbur Smith found out back in 1952. And this is a Canadian document that we consider as the smoking gun behind what the United States told Canada about this stuff back in 1952. Okay. And this is something that is absolutely revelatory and absolutely mind-blowing. Now, our question with the Canadians for Disclosure is, what would an MP, a Canadian MP, be a response? Or what would their response to this particular memo be? Okay, picture yourself as a member of parliament who knows nothing about UFOs, presented with this kind of documentation. What would be their response? And this is what Canadians for Disclosure want to find. And this is only one of the documents that we're going to be presenting to members of parliament for the Canadians of Disclosure. This information existed so long ago, but it's still relevant. Just because it's in 1952 doesn't mean that it's irrelevant or doesn't have the same gravitas that it had back then. It has extreme importance with respect to Canadian history, with respect to UFOs. So thank you for showing that one, and maybe we can go on to the next document if you want.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so I skipped a couple, so let me go ahead and go back a little bit here. And let's see. We looked at this one, and so we have this one here.
Okay, that one there. Where's that? Which one's that? Yeah, this is just another memo from WCGS Austin. Maybe you could go on. I've got another highlight in this particular document. If you go further about it, yeah. Okay, this is if you could go up a bit in that document. Yeah, there we go. The circular, the rectangle about it. This is the document written by the Joint Intelligence Committee. Okay. And this is extremely important to understand why the Canadian government is following the lead of the United States and keeping this secret. And if you see in the rectangle there, people who are following this closely, with respect to all of the stuff that's going on, the present USA policy is to notice above it. The present USA policy is to play down the subject, investigating only when consistent or considering necessary by the agencies and commander, without respect to arrangements for reporting, etc. But in the next paragraph, it seems that the Canadian government states it seems that a similar policy of non-reporting on our part would be wise, and that it would be undesirable to produce any special questionnaire giving publicity to the matter. It is suggested, therefore, that the sighting reports should not, this is really important, should not be solicited, and such as we are volunteered should be passed to the Director of Scientific Investigation for the retention or further action, only if necessary, action is deemed necessary. So this particular memo is the solid proof that the Joint Intelligence Committee in Canada is following the United States policy of keeping UFOs secret. This is the document, as far as I'm concerned, and if I'm an MP, I want to know about the fact, I should know about the fact that I was told, that the Canadian government was told by the American government to keep this stuff under wraps. And we want Canadian parliamentary representatives to know that the Canadian government was being controlled with respect to UFOs by the American government. So that particular memo says it all in spades. And it's the first time really that this has ever been made public.
And likely when and I was thinking about this as we read the first document, where it mentioned the United States, and you just said it, following the United States lead or doing what the United States tells them to do on this issue. It almost seems like words being channeled right through the Canadian government. And you would have to assume that other U.S. allies around the world also have that United States control over them when it comes to this subject.
You know what? You are exactly right. And that goes back to my previous reference to the Project for a New American Century, where the American government solicited its control over military, economic, and other political issues, including the UFO issue. And that's why when people say, well, if the United States government's got all this information and all other governments have similar amounts of information, why hasn't France? Why hasn't the UK? Why hasn't the Netherlands? Why hasn't Poland? Why haven't they said something about disclosure? Well, the reason is the United States controls the way they issue any kind of utterances or narratives about UFOs. Why that happens, we can discuss that in another show, but it really does dominate the entire global control that the United States has over other countries' policies with respect to the UFO issue. It's really dastardly. It really is an amazing kind of control that the United States has had over any number of countries with respect to UFOs, and Canada has suffered from that since 1952, if not sooner or earlier.
Yeah, and it would also explain why the United States is always Johnny on the spot for any crash people around the world. With the type of information that we're sitting here looking at, that's obviously real and authentic coming from the Canadian archives.
Yeah.
Have you guys experienced whistleblowers like in the same fashion we have?
No, the quick answer to that is no. And that's extremely unfortunate. And that's one of the things that Canadians for Disclosure will be working on with our advocates that we're going to be soliciting. We've got a huge number of people who have already volunteered to be advocates to meet with their MPs here in Canada. We've got just about 70 people so far who are willing to do this, and we're just in the embryonic stages of gathering and soliciting and recruiting Canadian people across the country. So we're at the point where we have these many people who are willing to do this. But what we're trying to do is have them, first of all, address the members of parliament in their own constituencies. That's our first job. But down the line, Rob, it's a very good point that you raised. We eventually want to invite people like pilots, like former military officials, pilots and radar operators, air traffic controllers, all these kinds of people who have been involved with any kind of monitoring of the skies, NORAD pilots, NORAD officials, to come forward to talk about what they have been told about UFOs in the past. Now, I might say, and this is going to be a shock to everyone, that I have engaged NORAD media representatives in the past. I have telephone conversations with these individuals in NORAD. And for your audience, I want to explain NORAD. NORAD is a joint intelligence operation between the United States and Canada that surveys all of the air traffic that occurs in the North American continent. Every single aircraft, anything that's in the air is monitored by NORAD. Okay, and that's a defense mechanism. Okay, but the thing is, it's a joint operation. Canada has its part in it, and the United States has its part in it, but it's a joint operation. Now, we have records where pilots have flown CF-18 jets to follow UFOs, and I've got documents to show that, and we might be able to show some of them tonight, where three UFOs were followed by two CF-18 jets over Comox Air Force Base. So we've got that kind of information, but it remains, once again, it remains sequestered. And I sent this stuff to ministry officials, which we'll get to later on. But the fact of the matter is that NORAD it has some sort of control over this. But in my conversations with some of the media officials in NORAD, and I'm not sure what kind of egg I'm going to be breaking here, but in my conversations with them, Rob, they told me that this stuff happens all of the time.
As far as incursions?
Daily.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have a letter from the commander of NORAD from Peterson Air Force Base that over a 5-year period, I got this letter back in 2015, over a 5-year period, 1,800 tracks of interest were captured on radar over Canadian airspace. 1,800. Now they call them tracks, TOIs. They call them tracks of interest. Now that does not necessarily mean UFOs, and I'll go further to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but when they say tracks of interest, that means tracks that they don't know where they originate from. They have no transponder. They have no identification, tail wing identification. They don't know what these tracks of interest are. And over a 5-year period, an average of 1,800 per year were tracked by NORAD. That means something. And that is not something that is in the public domain of the Canadian government. And they will not admit that. And we want to bring that forward and ask members of Parliament to raise this issue on the floor of the House of Government of the House of Commons, and raise this issue with the Minister of Defense. So picture yourself as an MP. You're an MP from Temiskaming, Ontario, and you rise to a point of order in the House of Commons with 343 people sitting there in the House of Commons, and the Minister of Defense is there, and I stand up as that representative from Temiskaming, and I say, Mr. Minister of Defense, may I ask you a question? Are you aware of the fact that NORAD is reporting that 1,800 UFOs or tracks of interest are reported over a 5-year period? Are you aware of that fact? Can you imagine what the Minister of Defense might think of when he's asked that question? That to me would be mind-blowing. And this is a matter of fact. This is not something that we're, just sort of constructing. This is an actual document that talks about Canadian NORAD officials and Canadian NORAD military jets are encountering over our airspace. Why would the minister not know about this? Does he know about it? And what action can he take about it? And then what would he say to the Canadian public with respect to that issue? These are the kinds of questions that we want to ask on the floor of the House of Commons.
And, speaking about that and NORAD's involvement, right? Well, it kind of reminds me of makes me think of the Chinese spy balloon incident from 2023.
There you go. Yep.
And we shot it down, obviously, but there were other things that were shot down in Canadian territory. So you figure they probably have archived some sort of paperwork about that incident. Is this something that you may be able to reach in and get? Do you have FOIA pathways there?
You know what? To be really frank with you, Rob, that is of zero interest to us right now, because, and I'll try to explain to you why. That whole balloon incident, it is totally devoid of any specific craft behavior that would indicate that those things were UFOs. In other words, they displayed zero characteristics of what typical UFOs display in their propagation in any airspace. These things were not performing any kind of exotic maneuvers. They were not moving in any kind of, to my knowledge, moving in any kind of exotic ways. They were not exceeding any high speed maneuvers. These UFOs travel at up to 11,000 miles per hour in our own atmosphere and make immediate right-hand turns, okay, in an instant. Okay, this is what UFOs do. 11,000 miles an hour and making a right-hand turn in an instant without breaking the sound barrier. None of these particular balloons, or whatever you want to call them, exhibited any kind of those behaviors at all. So we don't know what those things were. So as far as we are concerned at Canadians for Disclosure, we're not even going to address that issue with the balloons, because as far as we're concerned, it's a non sequitur. It's not something that the Canadian government, they may know things about it. They may know why they entered the airspace, why they were unauthorized. They were, in fact, unauthorized, no doubt about it, but they were in no way, shape, or form, in our opinion, any kind of resemblance to any kind of craft of unknown origin, of non-Earth origin. So as far as we're concerned, it's a non-issue, and we don't even want to go there with the Canadian representative. If they bring it up, we can explain what our thesis is about that. But as far as we're concerned, it's a non-issue.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the way that the United States being at the top of that pyramid, essentially, for information. When you look around the world at how the United States is currently being viewed, you'd have to wonder, would there be any of these allies like Canada or other countries that are allies that might say, you know what, don't like what the U.S. is doing, we're headed for destruction, let me go ahead and step out and release UFO documents. So let's do this to kind of shake this up. Do you see anything like that ever being possible?
Once again, you've asked a really good question. I guess it really would. My assessment of that would be in whose interest within any particular government outside of the U.S. What interest? What in their own interest? Why would they create any advantage to doing that? And I think the advantage that they would have if they chose to do something like that would be to buck the system. Okay, and to buck the system in the sense that the overall compendium of information that those countries that you're alluding to might have overwhelms any kind of secrecy that the United States government would want to perpetrate. So a certain country like the UK may want to come public and say, listen, the United States has attempted to control this issue over the past, 75 years, and we now are willing to refute that control. Now, if the UK government, which runs under the same parliamentary system that we do here in Canada, exactly the same parliamentary system, if they would have the courage to do that, that would be highly, highly significant in a non-trivial way. So if there is a movement there, we don't know about it. Okay, the UK has released UFO files. They released something like 27,000 back about 8 or 10 years ago, but they never made an issue of it with respect to refuting anything that would be a control mechanism with respect to the United States government. So, it takes a lot of courage to go totally public on this. And by going totally public on this, another country would have to say, listen, not only do we have UFO files, not only do we have our own, witness testimony, not only do we have our own military people who will attest to this, what we're doing is refuting everything that the United States government is saying about UFOs. And that takes a lot of courage for a government to say that. I'm not sure if any government out there that I know of has the courage to do that. So that's why we at Canadians for Disclosure are going to attack this issue from an individual member of parliament perspective, to have them informed, educated, and engaged with this issue so that they can stand up and say in the House of Commons, Mr. Minister, do you know about this? Do you know about that? On an individual basis, not a government. This is really important to understand. We don't want the Canadian government to come forward with this just yet. Okay. What we want to do is have individual members challenge the government at large to have their perspective and their understanding about this issue made public, and the secrecy that the Canadians have been exploited to by the United States government. That's what our frame of reference is. But in terms of your question, it takes a lot of courage for another government like Holland or the UK or France or Portugal to come forward publicly in the media to say that the United States government has been controlling this issue. That takes a lot of courage, and somehow with the current administration in the United States now, we don't know where that's going to go. We have no idea how the United States would respond to that kind of pressure from another country. That's very significant, because the person in charge of the United States government right now is an absolute madman, and we don't know where that will be going.
And let me stop you right there, because that's an awesome place to stop right here. Spaced Out Rated After Hours Radio Show. We'll be back to finish up this conversation with Victor Viggiani. See you after the break. All right, we are clear and awesome stuff.
If I'm going too far, you just tell me.
No, you are totally fine. Oh, believe me. If you've been watching the last couple of weeks, it went whoa. Okay. Yeah. I'll just say a couple of shows back. If you check that out, you'll know what I'm talking about. But yeah, and so I want to make sure that I remember, because I have a question to ask you right when we come back, and then we'll get into your questions, guys. I have been seeing them and tagging them.
Are there any other documents you want to go over? Or
yeah, we have them up. We can definitely,
okay.
Just whatever you want to see here.
Okay.
And since we're on break here, we can cue the next document if you want to.
Yeah, please. That'd be good.
Let me start from the top again here.
Yeah, done that. You done that one? Let's see. Yeah, we've done that one. That's good. We've done that. That's good.
And I think that's. Let me see.
We've done that one. Yeah. Which that? Okay, that we can deal with this one here.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
I could talk a lot about that one.
So we don't. People are reading it before we get to it. Let me go ahead and let's see. So we do have quite a bit of questions. If we need to, Victor, are you able to stay maybe 15 minutes later to answer some of the questions if we don't get to? Okay, great. Awesome. All right. And let's see. Pilgrim Society. Seems like a new name. Awesome stuff. I do appreciate you coming on in. Sasha. Hey, Sasha. Saying hello, Mr. Rob G. We have also Candace Helfrich. Haven't seen you before. Thank you for coming on in. We appreciate showing on up. Stargazer, has been a while. United States don't control the issue. They own it. Yeah, essentially. You can kind of see how this is going to go. And we're going to talk about that when we come back from the break. Let's see. Anyone else? Oh, I missed this question. Super crazy, but I got it now. And let's see. Magneticus Attractus. Appreciate you coming on in. It's strange. YouTube didn't notify me today. I hear that a lot, Magneticus. I don't even know what you would do about that. Maybe uncheck the bell and recheck it. Maybe toggle off and on. That's just going from my background troubleshooting. Start with that, sir. And let's see who else is out here.
Boy, there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah, definitely a lot of questions. And that's what you get when you get a great conversation, great information. You get a lot of questions, and they're good. They're good ones too. I see it. And let's see. Drew Banky from the back was saying, happy solstice, everyone. Okay, make sure we tell everybody that, Drew Banky, before we get you up here. I know we're going to have a great conversation. Hour 3. Can't wait to see you, bro. See you in a few minutes. And let's see. Okay, yeah.
I find it really interesting. Don't know how much longer we've got here. I find it really interesting how some of the comments are really, really the people who are putting them up are really they appear to be really well informed, and others of them are just like nut bars. Like I just, I might, I don't want to cast, but some of them are just like holy smoke.
Yeah, you'll get some of those just trolly sort of questions.
Yeah.
Truthfully, we don't usually ask those. So if I read it beforehand, it does make sense.
Fine. Yeah. I mean, if people are listening and they can say something, you really don't need to care about it unless it has some real kind of gravitas to it.
Yeah. And It's good though that Canada is stepping. I mean, it's just an example for those other countries that are aligned with the United States to make it something going individually. Because actually, the comment I'm going to make when we come back will tie all that together. So,
and also too, another point is some of the I'm just looking at them right now as I'm scrolling through them. Some of them are really saying, "Holy cow, I didn't know about this. My goodness, how." Like I said earlier, how long has this been going on, and why don't I know about it? You know,
and for us down here, we just figured that our neighbor right up here north is pretty aligned with our ideals and the processes, and it's amazing to hear how different it is and how where you guys are actually at in the movement. We got about 25 seconds left. Hey, Shelley Montgomery, I see you out there with the Rob G smiley face, wavy hand emoji. Thank you so much for coming on in. And anyone out there, if you're here for the first time, we do this Saturday and Sundays, after hours radio show, 8 p.m. Pacific until 11 p.m. Also, Dave Scott, Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. till midnight, 7 days a week. We do things right here on Spaced Out Radios. We come back right about now. All right, everybody, welcome back. Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours Radio Show. With me, your host, Mr. Rob G. We are back with Victor Viggiani talking about Canadians for Disclosure, a plan to educate and engage MPs about UFOs. Showing documents. We're going to show some more of those. Also get to your questions here in this last half hour. And actually, maybe go into overtime. If you missed any of the conversation, jump in the archives, youtube.com/@SpacedOutRadio, where the options are endless. So kind of jumping right back into it, we're going to get back into these documents, but I was thinking, I'm always thinking, but it was, we were talking about the United States being at the top of the totem pole, and then I'm looking at, okay, Canada is over here trying to get at least to the level that we're at in this disclosure process. Right. Hopefully, there are other countries out there trying to do the same thing. Hopefully, they have their own Victor Viggianis out there pushing for this. And I just want to stress, though, because it makes it even more important for us here in the United States, where we're at with this and how we are pushing for disclosure. Because, if you cut off the head, I think the body dies. And then with that being said, I think we get a snowball effect of countries just giving in, saying, UFOs are here. Once we get the United States to kind of get their grips off of all these countries around the globe. So just wanted to say that. Yeah.
No, you're right. I mean, it's a very good commentary on what's going on. I think what's important to realize, and for all of your listeners, that going back to this whole idea of the United States controlling the issue or appearing to control the issue or manifest themselves as being the dominant purveyor of this information. It's so important. It is. I can't stress this enough. That this is a global issue. This is an issue that deals with the human species, and this issue does not belong to the United States government. I mean, I say that in context of the huge amount of activity that's going on in the United States Congress, the Senate and House of Representatives. I say that in the context of all of the military witnesses that are coming forward in the United States, and they're doing a great job with respect to that. All of that is extremely important. There's no doubt about it, but it's done. It's almost like a two-headed snake. In one respect, they're pushing disclosure forward in a way that's viable and it's really important. But in another way, it appears to reassert the American government's control over this issue. So do you understand by the two-headed snake? It says no, we're in control of this issue, which is so far from the point, because this is not an issue when you look at this in a galactic sense with respect to how these extraterrestrials view us. They don't look at the United States as being the dominant force about this whole issue. They look at it with respect to us as a human species. They are dealing with us as a global species. They're not dealing with the president of the United States. They're not dealing with whistleblowers in any country. They look at the planet Earth as an entity in of itself, with a species endangered by its own extinction behaviors. And they want to deal with us on that level, saying that you've got a wonderful planet here. You've got an extremely a viable opportunity to extend your evolution in a way that you've never understood before, and become part of a galactic system where your species will become more energized by all of the things that will be part of this union with the Federation of these planets. And I know that exists. We are at the threshold of the next evolution of our species, and if we don't recognize that, we're in trouble. And in not recognizing it, we depend on the United States to tell us where to go with the issue. So you can see the dissonance between those two. The extraterrestrials are not engaging us because the United States thinks this is important. They are engaging us with respect to our species being endangered by extinction behaviors like nuclear weapons, like all of these things called borders, like all of these things called internal wars and conflicts. You know, they look at us as a very Neanderthal species. And I believe that they want to do or can do something about that to enlighten our species to become something different than it is right now. Because this, if you look at it, they are anywhere from 6 to 3 to 6 billion years in advance of who we are in terms of their own species. And look at what their development has brought them. First of all, they've evaded their own extinction. Okay, over millions and billions of years, they have not become extinct. That is a function of their intelligence. Okay, and I think they want to share that kind of information with us, because let's not make any kind of a doubt about this. Okay, we are on the precipice of extincting ourselves. There's no one in my mind that I know of that could dispute that fact. We are engaged in our self-extinction. And what's going on right now on the planet is proof positive that we are on the precipice of extincting ourselves. And if we understand what this whole idea of communicating with or engaging with off-world civilizations means anything at all, it will help us understand, A, that we are extincting ourselves, and that there is a way around that. Okay? And it's so important for people to realize that that is something so indigenous to what's going on with respect to disclosure. It's not just Canada. It's not just the United States or whatever. It is the human species that's at risk here. And if we don't pay attention to what this engagement means, we're going to be on our own. And that's a dastardly thing to think about if we continue on this particular pathway of extinction that we're experiencing right now. So I'll just stop right there and let you.
Because it's bananas that this is what you say, because what I was waiting to ask you actually is exactly this. And obviously we're on the path to the extinction of humanity, but not only that, it seems to have even expedited, which makes it even more critical that something happens. Do you think that makes the non-human intelligence or extraterrestrials anxious? And then do you think that they realize the expedited now need to probably step forward and do something? Do you think this happens, or is it even a thing?
Oh, what an incredible question. It's a matter of engagement, I guess, Rob. You know, are these off-world civilizations so advanced that they have any kind of agenda, need to engage us at a diplomatic level? Okay, and what that means is, if they have any kind of sense of compassion or understanding, because they've done this with other planets before. I'm convinced that Earth is not the only planet that they've engaged before that's at the same level or more or less, advanced than we are. They've done this before. They've been around the block before, so they know how to treat us as a species and as a planet. So they have an obvious way of engaging. Less intelligent, for lack of a better word, less intelligent species in a way that they can bring them along gradually to understand that they've got to do something about caring for the planet. Okay, not engaging in all these conflicts, and that it will lead to self-extinction. There must be some way that they engage planets to have people at a general level, not just governmentally, at a general level, to understand that they can't continue on these pathways of extinction. So in answer to your question, they must have some sort of mechanism of saying, hey folks, you know what, we're here. We've got some information for you that might help your planet get out of, the plastics in the ocean. That might have some way of dealing with your nuclear weapons and the propagation of that. We have some ideas as to how you might want to resolve your conflicts with respect to nuclear war and all the things that are going on the planet. We have ways of dealing with that. We've been through that before. And we have ways to. Now, the question is, will they choose to engage us at that level of diplomatic relations to explain those things to us? Are they that open, whoever they are they that open to engaging us on that level? Or do they just want to wait until we've burnt ourselves out and then they come in and say, well, listen, we'll fix things up? I don't know the answer to the question. But the fact of the matter is, we know that they're that advanced and that they have the pathways to eliminate our extinction. And what do they want to do about as a sentient group of people? I think that's what it boils down to. If they're as sentient as we think they are, they may want to choose when they engage us, at what level. And I don't know when that's going to be. What do we have to do in order for them to be here and say, hold on, folks, just stop, just hang on a second. Don't light the fuse for that nuclear weapon. Yeah. When will the point be? Will they engage? I don't know where they stand on that. Okay, whether it's an individual race that feels that way, or if there's a collective federation of races that feel that way, I have no idea about that. But the fact of the matter is, they are standing by, watching to see how we deal with the fact that the possibility is very clear that we could engage them, and we're getting towards that point. That's a very important question to ask. At what point are we at that we collectively, as a species, decide to engage them? And once we, as collectively, as a species, not as a government, but as a species, to engage them, when we get to that point, then they may engage us at the level that I think that you're talking about.
And truthfully, I'm under the belief that they have attempted to reach out and make contact at other points in times. I've done videos on that before, but without jumping into that, I want everybody to understand that Canada, just because they aren't speaking about UFOs, doesn't mean they are not fully complicit and aware of what's going on. And we have these archives here that Victor has brought, and I'm going to go ahead and show this next document here that you can speak to.
Sure, let's get into that if you want. Yep.
And we have that up here. And what exactly are we looking at?
This is going back to the Library and Archives Canada website. And I might say that the 9,500 UFO files that I've dealt with over the past, I guess, 10 or 15 years now, there's just so many of them. And when you start to read everything, when you start from 1 to 9,000, whatever it is, it's like reading the telephone book. And you click through them all, and it's extremely boring, because some of them are just, UFO researching, people researching UFO sighting reports. And it's really boring stuff, like reading the telephone book. But as you progress through them, you go, whoa, here's something really significant. And this is one of them. This is an RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which I alluded to earlier in the conversation. The RCMP is an intelligence agency within Canada that deals with everything with respect to intelligence across Canada, okay? And they are very, very effective in developing information, developing approaches to intelligence across Canada. And somehow what they were sent was this particular piece of information. A UFO was found, they called it a confidential memo by the commission of the RCMP, UFO found in northern Saskatchewan. And basically, I don't want to read the whole thing to you, but basically a pilot who was engaged in moving materials from one area of Saskatchewan to another, and he found a UFO, or they're part of UFO, and it says very, very clearly that It was something that was not of Earth origin, or apparently not of Earth origin. Now, the United States has its own reporting systems and all of that, which probably had very similar kinds of documents with respect to retrievals of materials. Okay, this is the only one that I have found so far that indicates that Canada has, in fact, or agencies of Canada, the RCMP, have found some sort of fragments or artifacts of a craft of unknown origin, non-Earth origin. And this thing was found in northern Saskatchewan, and it was brought to a criminal investigation laboratory in Regina, Saskatchewan, to be investigated. And this pilot, volunteered this information. And if you went on, I don't have all the documents in front of me. You don't, but right now the fact of the matter is that this was found. But there are 11 separate photograph documents of this pieces of this UFO. Okay, and they've segmented them into 11 different parts, and you can see. And I'll publish these if you wish later on, and I can publish them with your website if you want. That
Sir.
This craft is definitely not something that you would be of the order of an ordinary satellite. So there's got to be some sort of further investigation about what this thing was. They called it a UFO at the time. Whether or not it was in fact a craft of unknown origin, we don't really know. But the analysis that was conducted by this laboratory is sufficient to show that there's some very strange exotic materials in these particular fragments. And second of all, is that if these fragments are in this particular Regina laboratory of criminal investigation, they could still be there. We don't know where these things are. But if in fact these things do exist, we have now more sophisticated resources to analyze these particular craft, these particular fragments of the craft. And my point here is with respect to Canadians for Disclosure, is where are these fragments? And now, can the new, more sophisticated modern technologies, spectrographical capacities that we have here in Canada, why would these fragments not be examined more closely with respect to whether or not these are in fact of non-Earth origin? Now that does beg the question whether or not this was a UFO, and I will fully admit that right now. But they have not been examined with the specificity that we have right now, as opposed to what the specificity was back in 1968. So if we find out these in fact are not of Earth origin, that's a big deal. And if it's not, then we'll just lay where the cards are. I mean, that's something that we have to really examine. But the fact of the matter is that the UFO investigation at the time by the RCMP was in fact something that was withheld from the Canadian government. And if the Canadian government right now were to see this particular memo, any kind of curious MP would say, Mr. Minister, has any more investigation been done on these fragments? That question has to be asked. We've got 11 photographs of this particular craft. Why has there not been any more further analysis in a modern kind of sense of these particular fragments? And we want the results of that. Those are the kinds of questions that Canadians for Disclosure need to ask on the floor of the House of Commons.
And as I think about that, right? So I'm thinking, as we talked about a couple times here, that the United States obviously having control over these nations, where they won't address the UFO issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also thinking that wouldn't the United States likely seize any sort of UFO evidence and take it within their fold? And with that being said, is that, I don't know if it's would it be attainable potentially for you to go through your channel and get this data, or is it something likely we have over here?
I'm not sure of your question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so with the data that, like, for instance, this
Mm-hmm.
here, the material,
Okay,
isn't it more likely that we have that material than Canada at this point?
This particular stuff here?
Yeah, just any. I would say probably
You know
any
what?
material.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that's very possible because of the control, as we mentioned earlier, that the United States government have made it just perhaps the United States does in fact have the so-called evidence about this particular sighting. Yeah, they very well could. I would not for one moment dismiss the fact that the Canadian government might have, abdicated their authority over this particular set of materials for sure. Now, I should add too that this information is very, very similar to all of the retrieval artifacts that the United States government has done through separate corporate entities. They've gathered crashed UFOs before. They've done
Yep.
this, and you know this just as well as I do. They have collected UFO material, crashed UFO material. So this particular memo falls right in line with what the United States government has done with respect to their corporate gatherings of UFO crash materials, and that's well evidenced in a number of interviews that I've been part of and that I've listened to. That the United States government has in fact retrieved, a crash material of UFOs, of non-Earth origin material. So this thing fits right into that whole paradigm. So that's why I'm very suspect of raising this issue with respect to why Canada had this information. What did they do with it? Did they commandeer it in a way that we won't have access to it? And fourth of all, did they give this information or these segments, these fragments to the United States government? These are all very valid questions that we have. The thing here is, Rob, is there's so much about this stuff that's unknown. There's all of these things that go this way and that with respect to this issue. So these things have never been examined by the Canadian government, whether they're of any kind of redeemable, certainty. They may or may not have any kind of certainty. But the fact that the United States, or the Canadian government rather, does not have any kind of efficacy with respect to investigating this stuff is abominable. They're just disregarding it. They're not even considering this information. And that's why the Sky Project Canada has begun to look at what's happening here with respect to the UFO issue. They've just sort of nibbled at the edges. But then once they nibble at the edges of all this information, they're going to land up with asking the question, what is this UFO that was found? What's the material all about? Who investigated it? What's the spectrographic information about it? None of these questions are being asked. They're just sort of remaining in the back room, and we have to bring them forward into the front room to discuss them on the floor of the House of Commons. And that's basically, once again, I go back to what Canadians for Disclosure are all about. This is all part and parcel of it.
And this is why, when I think through this, it always, everyone has a question on why is it so hard to crack the disclosure bubble, and
Yeah.
you think about it as these countries, these things being individual. Like, okay, we're dealing with the U.S. trying to get them to come forward. You're dealing with Canada, they're dealing with these other countries. When it is more likely just a concerted effort by all countries, probably a lot of them, to kind of keep this quiet, which is why it would seem like it's so hard to break through this, because it's complacency, around the globe. So the United States, in fact, wouldn't fear someone else stepping out in a normal situation, another country stepping forward because of this agreement that they have. And that's probably where it gets into politics, favors,
Of course, yeah.
that nature, where they almost guarantee themselves that they will not step forward. And so I think that kind of might make more sense on why they're so reluctant to kind of let it go, because then we find out that they have controlled the narrative, not just here, but globally. And that is even worse than, what we consider them doing right now. So we got about 45 seconds left before we go to the break.
Okay.
Did you have anything to add? And actually, yeah. Did you have anything to add to that?
No, you're right. It's a matter of once again, it's a matter of control, Rob. I can't stress that enough. And the reason why the control is there, and this is just my personal opinion, and I think I share this with a number of other researchers, is that there is, let me be as clear as I can about this. There is something about this issue that may be too much, and I say this guardedly. There is something to this issue that may be too much for humanity to be revealed to, too much for them to handle. And I'm not discounting that possibility, that this issue may be too big for the human species to handle. Not that we shouldn't know about it, but it just, once it's happening, there will be such an ontological shock that people will go into like a cascade failure in their own mind about what's going on in the universe. Okay,
hold it
so
right there.
Yeah,
We're going right into the break right now. With Victor Viggiani. He's going to join us for overtime. So we'll be back right after the break with your questions and more.
Listening to After Hours with Mr. Rob G on the only place where you can own the night. Spaced Out Radio.
Spaced Out Radio.
You've tuned your dial to the right frequency.
All right, we are clear. Roger Murray, good night. Talk to you later. And we're taking another 5-minute break. Victor, see you in a minute. right, everybody. Welcome back. Spaced Out Radio After Hours Radio Show. We coming back from radio for the radio break in about 10 seconds. We're getting to your questions right now, guys. So we come back in 5 seconds. Here we go. All right, 5 more seconds. We had a system issue here. Like that. All right, everybody. Welcome back. Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours Radio Show. We're in After Hour number 3 now with our guest, Victor Viggiani, is on overtime to answer your questions. We're going to go ahead and get to those right now. It's been an awesome conversation. Hours 1 and 2 were epic. If you missed any of it, hop in the archive, youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. And don't go anywhere because coming up, we have Drew Banky with the After Hours wrap up, maybe some UFO and weird news coming up next, right here. Don't you go anywhere. As we go ahead, and let me actually go ahead and grab the first question here. And looks like this one is coming from Mike Rivers. Does Victor think that some or most of the UFOs might come from the opening at the top of the world, which would be why NORAD is so involved?
Well, I wish I was qualified to answer that question. There's been some really intense research done by different individuals. One of them, Richard Dolan, who have indicated that there just may be, and I've talked to Richard about it, that there may be underwater bases that house these UFOs, or some sort of bases where these things are collected and emanate from. So whether they be from the North Pole or the South Pole, or underwater in different parts of the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, Richard has pointed out, and from my estimation, and when I talked to him, there are between 600 and 700 documented cases of these UFOs emanating from the water or different parts of the planet underground that may in fact indicate that these things are already here. As bizarre as that may sound, that is something that has expanded the narrative as to how these extraterrestrials have either been here for a long time, or have just sort of made themselves a home here for a short period of time. We don't know what, but there is a lot of evidence and if you look at the evolution of this whole issue in terms of how UFOs have manifested themselves over the decades, in the skies and so on and so forth, it's also, in history, that these things have been around on the planet for centuries, not just decades, but centuries, indicating that they have been, structuring things like helping to construct the pyramids, Stonehenge, different kinds of pyramids all the way around the world. And it's no coincidence, as far as I'm concerned, that the pyramids in Egypt have similar construction identification parts as to other pyramids all around the world. Why are pyramids so prevalent all around the world rather than just in Egypt? So there's a lot of questions that are open to all of that. And I with my experience in all of this over the last 45 to 50 years, I have learned that do not count anything out at this particular point in time with respect to how these extraterrestrials are engaging. I'm not talking about conspiracy theories here. Okay, I'm not even alluding to that. What I am saying is that whoever these off-world civilizations are, and wherever they're from, and to what level of intelligence in terms of their own evolution they are, I will not discount anything with respect to how they've engaged our planet in the past and how they may have entrenched themselves into parts of our planet. I will not discount any of that.
All right, awesome answer. And let me go ahead and get you your next question here, which comes from Woo Writers DG, asking question: what will global disclosure look like once it happens?
A bad Picasso painting. It's a good question. What will it look like? First of all, it'll depend on where it emanates from, and it'll depend on um, how it manifests themselves. In other words, who or what entity will come forward and say, "Okay, um, this is the case. This is the situation." And here I guess I'm going to backtrack on some of my previous denigration of the United States government, but it just may take the United States government or some set of officials from the United States government to make a broad and overlying statement with respect to a broad media announcement on something like, CBS News, 60 Minutes, or some globally accessible media entity, that the United States comes forward and says, okay, look, folks, UFOs are real and they've been engaging us for a long time, and we're admitting it, and we admit that there's secrecy about all of this, and we regret that. But there were reasons why we needed to keep this from you. But right now, that we're disclosing the fact that we are in fact being engaged by off-world civilizations. End of story. That's one way that it could happen. The other way that it could happen would be whoever these extraterrestrials are, either whether there's a collectivity among them, a federation, a galactic, family, whatever you want to call it, whether they decide to manifest themselves in a way that's indisputably recognizable to everybody on the planet. I'm talking about everyone. It doesn't matter whether they're, in the boreal forests of whatever nation or the Amazon. Every single human being on the planet will recognize by a statement coming forward by these extraterrestrials as a group or individually, I'm not sure, that they are in fact not from here, and that they are in fact entities representing off-world civilizations, and they manifest themselves in some arcane way. That could be craft, it could be, I don't know what. I mean, that's the other way that disclosure could happen, where that the human family just recognizes it because they just show themselves, like the Pilgrims did to the Native Indians of indigenous people of the United States. And they, my understanding is the Pilgrims sat in the ocean for 3 months before they made themselves known to the indigenous communities in North America. They sat there for 3 months before they manifested themselves. So it just may find its way to us in a very similar way to understand that they're here, and who are they and why they're here, and all of that. That's what disclosure, as far as I'm concerned, could look. There may be another way. I don't know. We have no idea. There's all kinds of discussions about these beings being interdimensional entities, time travelers. There's another way that it could happen. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's an open discussion. It's an open narrative, and it could happen in any way, shape, or form that you could imagine, as far as I'm concerned. Because the main reason is these beings, whoever they are and wherever they're from, they're 3 to 6 billion years in advance of us, and they may have mechanisms of how they disclose themselves to other planets, and they'll use it on us. We just have no way of exactly knowing how they might do it. So it may not even be up to us.
And so this actually piggybacks off of that and you kind of answered this next question sort of, but there's a part here that maybe you haven't addressed. So super crazy movie geek is asking, how do you think UFO disclosure should be done? All at once, slow rollout, and then mainly would the majority of humanity freak out in your mind?
Okay, I'm reading the question here. It says, how do you think that it should be done? Well, if you look at the statement, how should it be done, that implies that there is someone or some entity or some group or some government that has the full story. I don't think that's the case, but that's just my opinion. How should it be done? If quote unquote, the United States government or the collectivity of other nations who know about this stuff decide in some way, shape, or form on their own to say, yes, we've kept this stuff from you for 75 years, and now we're telling you the full story. That could happen, but I think when or if it does happen, there'll be a tremendous blowback. The blowback will be, why have you kept this from us? That'll be the big question. So I don't see it to be in any government's interest to do that. Let's say, okay, here's the full story, people. We've been lying to you, and here's the UFO issue, or in spades. I just don't think that it's going to happen that way, because the repercussion globally, geopolitically, would be so dastardly, because humanity and people who have got any kind of political awareness would jump down the throats of government saying, you've been lying to us about this, and what else have you been lying to us about? So it would open up a can of worms that I think that any kind of government agency or collectivity of government agencies, they would do it at their own risk. They would be slitting their own throats if they did it that way. So I really don't see the United States government coming forward and doing this unless they're forced to in some way that we don't know about. The other part of the question, should it be slow? As far as I'm concerned, it needs to happen now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, but now. Yeah. So that's my answer to that. And would the majority of humanity freak out? That comes to the question of ontological shock. Ontological shock means that there will be a body of knowledge that the human species or individual members of our species could not possibly handle. It would be just too much for them to absorb. That that we're alone in the cosmos is something that they believed in for all of their lives, and then to reverse that notion, saying that we're part of a galactic community, there is a segment or a large segment of our population who would not even consider admitting that possibility exists. And I say that directly because there are people who have ruled this situation out absolutely as being a false narrative. So if those people are confronted with the idea that we are in fact not in fact alone in the cosmos, and B, that these civilizations are engaging us, they will have a difficult time absorbing that information. Very difficult. There'll be a large segment of the population that just will not be able to admit it, and some may in fact have mental disorders because of it. It will be that difficult. That's my assessment of that particular question.
All right. And as I address this camera issue next, and actually I did want to say this is to the United States government, as far as the disclosure process goes,
I've lost you here.
Very, very strange. I don't know what happened there, but I'm saying what I was going to say is with the United States government. Okay, so you've kicked us in the teeth here for all these years, and essentially have attempted to pee on our leg and tell us that it's raining. Even though we still giving you the blueprint on how you could go forward right now and resolve this and get it done, and you still won't do it, and that just speaks volumes to me.
Yeah.
Next question was coming from you want to add to that?
No, I just want to say that if they did do it, if as you say, if the United States government did do it, it would mean a massive relinquishing of control on their part. That it would, if they did admit that there are these galactical groups of people, these off-world civilizations, they do exist. The automatic pushback on that would be that the United States would have to admit that it's not the all-powerful, spectral, dominant government entity on the planet or in the cosmos. They would have to admit that anything that they have or do or in possession of in terms of armaments, intelligence, it would be just helpless in confronting any of these intelligence. They would have to admit that they are no longer in control. And as well as I do, the United States government is not very good at that.
Facts. As we got Roger Berry up here asking, Victor, the Falcon Lake UFO incident, May 20, 1967, fact or fiction?
Well, all of the documents that I have read, particularly if you go to Library and Archives Canada and look at the documents about that, and that's basically all that I have on that in terms of documents. I do have some researchers that have done more in-depth look at that particular incident. My assessment is, in fact, that Stephen Michalak did, in fact, encounter a UFO, and he had some extremely, unhealthy effects as he encountered that particular craft. And he's been examined by doctors, and all the examinations show that whatever he encountered was not something of Earth origin, and that seems to be the common consensus. So I don't think it's fiction at all. I think this man actually encountered something, and if he in fact encountered something of Earth origin, we don't have anything that could have done that. There's no possibility that he was exposed to something that was that deleterious to his own health and physical being. It must have been the conclusion that I have, is that he encountered something that was not of this earth. And I think it's definitely a factual kind of incident, among others too. There's a number of those that are globally accepted as in direct encounters with UFOs that left physical effects on people and places, and ground effects.
All right. And we have about, 7 minutes before break, and we have 4 questions left. So let's try to rapid fire on these ones.
Mm-hmm.
We got Mark Cosgrove asking, any new or more information on Shag Harbor?
There's nothing new on Shag Harbor, other than the fact that it did happen. The RCMP investigated it, and there has been some severe information by someone who was, this is going to blow your mind away, but I'll say it anyways, that was in a craft under the water, an abductee who was taken under the water, a person from the United States was taken under the water that visited the actual Shag Harbor incident. She was in a craft with another being that saw the craft that landed, that was crashed, and she exhibited a direct encounter with the craft and saw the beings that were controlling the rescue of this craft in Shag Harbor. And I'll leave it right there for another time in interview, because this story is a breaker, and her story is absolutely monumental. That's never been expressed before, because she saw directly what happened to the rescued craft underwater as she witnessed it with another extraterrestrial being.
That'd be a great reason to bring you back here. Let's go to the next question here. We have Dead Fish Cheese Spread. Have you heard anything about the recovery in the Yukon for February 11, 2023?
I'm sorry, I have no, sorry to cut you short, but no, I have no information on that particular incident of February 11th. Sorry.
Yep. And then we have the Ferret asking, when did the event over Comox occur?
2001. I'm trying to think of the month. I think it was September of 2001. It didn't happen over Comox Air Force Base. The jets that chased the 3 UFOs were scrambled from Comox Air Force Base, and the actual contact occurred someplace over the midwestern part of Canada at about 35,000 feet. So that's when that happened.
All right. And then Shelley Montgomery asking, Rob G, question for guest, what does he know about the Yellow Book?
Not familiar with it. Sorry, I wish I could give you more. There's a lot of stuff I know, but that's not one that I do. And if Shelley wants to inform me more about that, she can contact me at my email address is zland@simpatico.ca. All
right. And then let's see. Okay, so that would be it there. And I'm going to just fix my camera on break. But it says a question I have for you, right? So you research UFOs for over 40 years. What are some of the cases that you felt should have just cracked disclosure? Like, you just knew this would be the one that cracked it?
The cases, or see, it's a double-edged question. The cases about UFOs are one thing. The cases about abductees are another. They're two separate ones. I can address the UFO cases. You know, the Lonnie Zamora case in Socorro, New Mexico, was definitely one that, to me, in my mind, is on the same plane as Roswell. You know, that is, you know, they're very parallel in their significance, and there are a lot of others in terms of, you know, crash sites and encounters. There's been a lot of books, you know, written about different encounters. Richard Dolan has so many of them that he's cataloged. So there's not one particular one. It's the catalog of information that's really important. It's not just one incident that really kind of gives it away. The other aspect of that is the people who have encountered off-world beings, they're called experiencers or abductees. Those are the people, in my mind, who have it solidified the fact that we are in fact being engaged by off-world civilizations. I've interviewed and dealt with and counseled upwards of 16 people who have had direct experiences with extraterrestrial beings, to the point of being impregnated by these individual off-world civilization beings and brought back, having these things gestated in their womb and then brought back to the craft and having them removed. And these things have been documented by a number of people. Dr. John Mack for one, Whitley Strieber for another, and a number of other individuals who've had dealings with individuals who've had direct physical contact with extraterrestrial beings. So they're the two separate ways of looking at this issue. Which one's more important? That's anyone's guess. But the fact of the matter is, we have human beings who have in fact engaged face to face with these extraterrestrial beings.
All right. And then as far as Canadians for Disclosure, how do you plan to grow this movement? And where do you see this going? Like, what are your goals for the end of the year for Canadians for Disclosure?
Great question. First of all, the way we're growing it is by doing programs like this. And any Canadians that are listening, I would really exhort them, if they have any kind of desire to challenge or to engage with the Canadian government, to contact me at ZlandCommunications, or let me give you my email, zland@simpatico.ca, zland@simpatico.ca. Contact me if you're a Canadian citizen and you reside in a constituency with a member of parliament. Contact me and we will engage you as a member of our coalition to approach members of parliament. We want to grow this whole movement very, very directly and very specifically with respect to people who want to really change the narrative with respect to this. So we're working really hard to expand our narrative and to expand our constituency with respect to people who want to bring about change to all of this. We want to do it on a grassroots, individual basis. So please contact me if you can about this, or visit our Discord, and go to Discord and lock into Canadians for Disclosure, and you'll find out more about what we're doing. And we have a meeting on June 29th coming up if you want to find out more about that. And that's how we're going to try to grow this whole organization.
That is awesome. Victor Viggiani, I knew it was going to be epic. You're on my go-to list for great conversations already. It's a short list of individuals, and I do appreciate you coming on in here tonight and staying overtime to answer some questions. We got to do this again. We need to do it sooner than later. So I'll reach out to you, and I appreciate
let's hope we do. And I want to come back to you and be able to suggest that we're going to have over 150 to 200 people who want to become part of this whole initiative to address our members of parliament. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Rob. I really do appreciate it.
Yes. Awesome stuff, Victor. You have a great rest of your night. You take care. Thank you so much. All right. Guys, that was awesome, right? I'll fix my camera on break. I do want to thank you for being patient with me here. We're going to go ahead and jump into our final break of the night right here on Spaced Out Radio, the After Hours radio show with me, your host, Mr. Rob G. We'll be back after the break with Drew Banky, I promise, with the After Hours wrap up. See you back here in just a moment. All right, we're clearing, guys. We're going to take impromptu off-camera break for 5 minutes. So we'll play some music, and I'll see you back here in just a moment. Un momento, por favor. All right. Coming back early from that commercial break. We have about 15 seconds before we come back from the radio break here, guys. So let's get ready to go and wrap up the show. Last 30 minutes, guys. Let's get pumped up. Let's go. All right. It's going to be a couple more seconds here, actually. All right, everybody. Welcome back. Spaced Out Radio After Hours Radio Show. Back half of hour number 3. Already going to be joined by Drew Banky here in just a moment. We want to thank our guest, Victor Viggiani, for staying late, answering your questions, having an awesome conversation as always for hours 1 and 2. I'm telling you, if you missed it, you got to hop in the archives. Absolutely free. YouTube.com/@SpacedOutRadio. As we go ahead and get ready to bring in our 3 guys, the man with the plan. You guys know him as Drew Banky.
You're an irredeemable monster!
Come here, I'm gonna eat you! Get in my belly!
Take it in the Lord! Take it in the Lord! Do it! That man's got Lord!
You're a monster!
The After Hours wrap up with none other than this guy right here, Drew Banky. How you doing, Drew? How you been? Yeah, you're muted. Yeah, sure, you're muted. I am not hearing you, sir. Check your mic settings. It doesn't show you're muted, but we can't hear you. So while Drew Banky figures that out, let's talk about how awesome conversation was here. I'm sure he'll interrupt me in a moment when he fixes the mic. But yeah, the After Hours wrap up, looking back on the conversation, just stresses how, you see someone, and that's why I love to talk to Victor, because, when people that are moving the needle, I love it, right? Those are the conversations we're supposed to have. Those are the individuals we engage, and, putting everything on your back for a country, right? And saying, I'm going to be the one that steps out and gets this thing going. Here's how we can do it, right? That's what I love about that. Now, hopefully there's, like I said earlier in the interview, other Victor Viggianis out in the world doing the same thing for their country. Imagine if we could all do, if we could coordinate that movement in this moment right now. Do you hear Drew Banky? Are you on?
I'm here.
Ah, good. Okay, Drew Banky has stepped in. That was wrap up. Drew's, man, powerhouse interview, man. Victor's awesome, dude. And any takeaways or what stood out to you about tonight?
I love old paperwork. Whenever anyone shows old paperwork, it's something to me. Like when Grant Cameron was bringing out all that paperwork a year or two back, about the anyways, those files. But anyway, dating back to 1952, and then he leaves us with that cliffhanger of the abductee of the USO, the watercraft. Yeah, it was a powerful interview. I loved it. I was engaged with it the whole time. So
I'm glad to hear that. And like I said, he brought receipts to the table, which is lovely. It's weird how someone be able to pull these documents out of a country that you just won't say anything public about it at all, not even acknowledge or say the word UFO or UAP. They won't even say it. But then you have paperwork like this in the background that they pull out from 70 years ago that says you might also consider it advisable to add that should the flying saucer actually make a landing on Canada, how is anyone else supposed to take that but acknowledgement of flying saucers potentially landing in Canadian territory and in various other places in the world? And man, it's just, as we talked about earlier, the United States, I think, just has so much of a stranglehold on all these other countries, so where they won't act on this matter independently, they're going to do what the United States government says, which means that's why I was saying at the end of the interview, that's why it's very important that us as United States American citizens keep our foot on the neck of Congress and our humanity-led disclosure, because I'm a believer, if you cut off the head, the body will die, and which means everyone will step out and say, hey, yeah, this is what we have, and we have global acknowledgement, confirmation moment, and let's get past it and see what we need to do for step 2, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, these documents come out. There's been several come out from the United States. Now, these documents, they've been out before from Canada and other places. I mean, this is disclosure by a lot of people's, like guidelines that they went over. Like they've already had disclosure when they released these files. I mean, they're straight up talking about a flying saucer in paperwork, and this is just from 1952. I'm sure there's documents that's going to come out that was before then. Roswell was before then, and like what has to be said. I guess it has to be someone stepping up to a podium, president or someone somewhere close, and to say like publicly that they exist. But United States likes to be on the forefront of that. So that if it does come down to someone stepping to a podium, I'm pretty sure it'll probably be the president. And it feels like that time may be coming. There's a lot happening in the world. Of course, this was a big news day today, and we need to be vigilant, but stay in prayer, and prayer, however that looks to you, to whatever supreme being or higher being or higher frequency that you pray to. But now's the time to do that, and I think that's what's gonna trigger it. All this happening. So I think we're right here at the threshold of it, man. And it's no accident that's on solstice. So
yeah, I saw you put that out there earlier. Solstice. Shout out to the solstice as we go ahead. So with that being said, when we have these conversations, right, not everybody is going to be able to be a UFO researcher or has the ability to step in there, and I'll even say myself, it's hard gathering information and curating it. So I always give shout out to people that do that. But this is kind of, when you listen to a conversation like this and you go through these thought processes, it's kind of it's a moment for you to figure out where you can fit into this. Like, man, how can I play a part in where would my talents fit into this equation? How could I also help get us across the goal line? One thing I was like, man, it's unfortunate that all this segregation happens. And when I say that, I mean, we have a country over here doing their thing, country over there. So we don't have like a unified movement. I was wishing, I was like, what if the global citizenship started putting the pressure on the powers that be, meaning the United States government, right? Because based on what we talked about, they essentially are the global government. Let's just call them that. It's true. So I'm not lying here. And what if everyone together was like, heck no, you know what I mean? Like, let's release this. We need to get this out and maybe create some sort of movement. I'm always thinking about what it takes to get us to that next step. This is just something I'm throwing out there. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, take it a step further. I think it was that famous quote that Reagan said about what would the world be like if we were facing, an enemy that was outside of Earth. So would we come together as a planet? Basically what that was saying. And that question, we have to ask that question in these times now. Like, what are we going to come together as a collective at some point and embrace this or fight it, or we need to I think the world knows, and I think there's enough out there to say like we're not alone. I think that's as a collective, I think we've agreed upon that. But any questions past that opens up a ton more. The pressure for the governments to have disclosure. I don't think that most people really look at the government for disclosure. I think the normies do, but I think as far as our community and stuff, I don't think we're looking at the government for disclosure or need the government for disclosure. The normies do.
Yeah. Those people have mommy daddy complex is what I call it. They are looking for mommy daddy's approval, or if they say it's so, then it's so. We really could circumvent them totally. The only thing, and I've said this before, the only thing governments have over the general public as far as the ability to collect data is getting things like radar data, some super expensive equipment. And even though we should be able to get that data because we paid for the equipment, so let's not even go there. But with that being said, the only thing that they really do have is the they have the ability to store craft. They have the ability to retrieve bodies and do those things. That's the only thing they really have above us. The only thing that people would look to them for would be confirmation of something like that. So that can still coexist with the movement that we're on, but just like leave it to the side. People shouldn't focus on the government so much because we already know how this goes. And if they give anything at some point and it ends up being like the cherry on top, great. Okay, great. You guys did something. Okay, great. This new committee, you did. Okay, great. Right. And we just need to make sure that we continue on our goal, which is why we do this show, Drew Becky, which is why we sit here and do exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's been talk about non-human biologics that we have in our possession. So, I mean, like a legit showcase of that, like, that would do it, something like that. But that begs the question: is the public ready to see like a legit video of our biologics that we have? All our trusted people there in attendance and can see it, and get as close to it as they can and stuff like that. Like, are we ready to see that on something that we believe is a real video? That's another, that begs a whole nother question. Like, and the guest brought up a good thing. Like, what's the implications? Is everybody mentally prepared to see something like that? And I don't think as far as the whole collective, I don't think that we're all ready to see that at this moment.
Unfortunate as that is, because I do agree with you. Unfortunate as that is, as also we were talking about earlier, when you have things that come up that kind of expedite our path to the annihilation of humanity, then it's like there is no waiting then on something to hopefully happen. It's like you kind of have to get out there and make something happen, and that's kind of where we're finding ourselves right now. So with that pressure on, I'm really hoping that something, we were able to pull something out, or extraterrestrials, as I was saying earlier, become anxious and are like, man, we got to step in, emergency meeting. They're getting crazy down there. Let's go ahead, step in and just bring it in, and so we can quiet the stuff down. And hopefully that's what's happening. I don't know that it is, but it would be pretty cool for them to do what people think they're going to do and step in and stop our self-annihilation. Let's start there.
Yeah, well, I mean, this stuff going on in the Middle East right now, like Bledsoe's talked about this and said that this was going to trigger an interaction, like on a big interaction. So we'll see, man. It's there's a lot of stuff going on right now. So we'll see what happens.
And one thing I did want to point out too is that this is the kind of sidebar to all this we can talk about real quick. Is I did a video recently on my own channel, which is youtube.com/@Mr. Rob G, just as it's spelled on the screen if you wanted to know.
Follow.
And then so essentially what we were talking about is the latest Corbell video that was released. You see it with the camera angle from above, and it shows this, what he's calling a flying saucer, moving through the clouds, kind of trying to be undetected, basically hiding in the clouds. Have you seen that video yet?
I haven't. I can't say I have.
Yeah, so here's what you can do, and this is shameless plug. Wow, why not? Let's see. You can go right here to this page, Drew Banky. Just want you to know personally, you can go right here to this page, which happens to be the Social Dig. And we did a show right there in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up here for the radio audience. Once again, it's youtube.com/ at Mr. Rob G, MisterRobGee. And there's a show there called UFOs Art Imitating Life. And, how much this video, and we showed the video there, is almost a mirror image of what Jordan Peele did in the movie Nope. I mean, you can't help but realize that likely he may have seen this video at some point in time. And the whole thing we go into is, who are the people out there that are speaking to these directors and giving them inside information on UFOs, which kind of also ties into, kind of spoiler alert, but we talk about Spielberg and his, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, how that movie was so impactful and still lives up to this day with the things that they shown there. And it's because of J. Allen Hynek, and it's because of Jacques Vallée being advisors on that. We talk about how Spielberg himself has not seen a UFO ever in his life, but he is finding it in this moment to go ahead and make a new movie about the extraterrestrial experience. They just started earlier this year. The working title was called Disclosure. I think it still is. And it just makes you wonder how it's going to impact this moment. Will it come soon enough? Hopefully it comes before, we need it now, but hopefully it comes before we go down this new path of self-annihilation. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, but we definitely need it now. Yeah, but I haven't heard of that movie. It sounds like it's going to be interesting for sure. But yeah, plug in Rob's page. I will check that video out. But yeah, there's a lot of videos out there, and a lot of people, people sending me videos. I just got another one today of some weird stuff, and yeah, it's just ramping up, man. I feel like it ramping up more and more, and yeah, just interesting, man. Looking forward to that movie though.
Definitely. And we got our mods out there handling troll patrols. Let me know if anything needs to happen there. Do appreciate that, man. It's Crazy Life channel. That's awesome. Comment to make there. But as we get ready to kind of get to the end of the show, we have about 4 minutes left. It's just been a great show, man. It's just been, and I felt that way. And the lineup that we have coming up so far this summer is going to be epic. I have to say this because I have been wanting this interview for a long time, to sit down and have a really, really, really good conversation with none other than Steve Bassett. We got Steve Bassett coming in talking the Paradigm Institute. We got, I'm a fan of his work. There's so many things I really want to talk to him about. I'm excited about that interview coming up next month. Also, we have just different ones that we haven't announced yet. Go look on spacedoutradio.com and you'll see the ones we have posted coming up tomorrow. We have Augie Nast. I think you remember Augie Nast. I'm pretty sure you were here last.
Yeah, I was just on a show recently too. So
okay, nice. So there we go. Synergy. There we go. It's gonna be awesome tomorrow.
Yeah, I love Augie. He's good.
So with that being said, man, and I gotta say this because we have viewers that are all over the world, and we have also viewers that are being affected by things that are going on because they are actually in the locations where these things are happening. So I gotta send out love and prayers to our family, essentially, that out there being affected, and just prayers. And I don't know how I would handle something like that. And it's so awesome. And I tell this person this, I don't put it on blast, but I tell this person this because you don't have to make sure that you have time to come and check us out here while this is going on. This is the last thing on the list here, but you're finding a way to still come in, be supportive in a moment where you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And that is an awesome thing to me. It really is something that I love people, and I love people who love people, and that's a love people kind of thing right there. I don't know what else to say. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, it's my heart goes out, to Polly in particular, and anyone else being affected by what's going on over there in the Middle East. And yeah, just like I said, remain in prayer. I think that's very important in these times. And I think this is a big test. We're going through a big test, and as far as humanity right now, and yeah, just start keep looking inward, man, and praying and sending that love out. And I'm definitely sending my love out to everybody that's affected, and directly or indirectly. And yeah, I got a big surprise coming in the fall, so as a guest.
Good stuff. I'm glad to hear that. I already know when you say that, I know something's coming down the pipeline. And like I said, it's just one of those things where I'm just so glad that I'm looking around, and I'm kind of troubled by, obviously very troubled, I'll say, by what's going on in the world. And I just envision disclosure, like the button for disclosure being behind one of those alarm glass where it says break glass in case of emergency. And it's like, dude, we need to break the glass right now and pull the lever for disclosure, because it's day by day we just don't know, and I'm just hoping that something happens before the other thing happens. And if anybody out there can make that happen, whistleblower or not, if you're in the program, step out right now. There's no better time to do it than right now. We need you to step out and tell us about the craft. Bring the pictures, bring a piece of the craft, bring whatever you can bring, and let's go ahead and bring disclosure in. Let's make this happen so we can change the way that our direction, where we go from here. Because right now it's not looking great, the path that we're on. And let's just try to. We have the ability to affect that. You don't think so, as because we're just the citizens, but if we get together on this and we make this thing happen, we can change. We can move mountains, right? That's what they say. So with that being said, did you want to leave everybody with anything? We got about 30 seconds before we lock this thing up.
That's good to be back. And yeah, this is one of the last few interviews here before I move to a new place. So
I figured that was coming up. I figured that was going to be a conversation here. So we'll talk about that more tomorrow night. Once again, also appreciate you giving up some of the time tonight to our guests to answer questions for the audience. I know they're very appreciative too. Definitely want to thank not only Drew Banky here tonight, but I want to thank Victor Viggiani for being the guy that he is, being selfless. I love selfless individuals who are doing things for the benefit of the greater. And if we could have more people like that, what a world this would be. With that also being said, I definitely want to thank you guys out there for being awesome in the chat with the greatest comments and the greatest questions tonight to add to an awesome conversation. We also want to thank the man that you hear right there in the background. He's Ron Bumblefoot Dog. This is the guy that rocks us out each and every show and teaches us. He tells us never to say never again, because yes, the phenomenon is real, which means anything and everything beneath that is possible. If you enjoyed the show tonight, make sure you show your love, put your horns up. Also, hit that like button. It has been a pleasure serving you tonight as your host. I'm Mr. Rob G. This is Drew Banky right there. This is the After Hours radio show, guys. And to all you space travelers out there, not a goodbye nor a farewell tonight. Another great conversation, and best believe we'll be right back here, same time, same place, to do it all over again. Thanks for coming on in, guys. Have a great rest of your night. Take care. We're clear. And awesome show, man. And just, yeah, awesome show. It's great. We're going to be having an even awesomer show, or just as awesome tomorrow. It's going to be this way going forward, guys. We're raising the bar right here on the After Hours Radio Show. So make sure, if you haven't caught the show before, let you know again, we're here Saturdays and Sundays specifically for this show, which is 8 p.m. until 11 p.m. Pacific. Then you have Dirty Filth with cryptic cartoons on Saturday at like 2 p.m. Pacific. You got to make sure that you tune in for Phil drawing all sorts of awesome stuff. He'll be here on this show with us. He'll be joining us on the screen here next Sunday when we have Karen A. Dahlman joining us. So that's going to be awesome. Make sure you're here for that. Also, we have UFO Max with Grantavious Max and Lee Strauss on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Element 115 with Lee Strauss and Tim James Fridays at 8 p.m. Dave Scott, conductor of the Wu Train, Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. until midnight. Point that I'm making is 7 days a week, you're going to find something awesome right here on Spaced Out Radio. So if you haven't already considered, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Also the notification bell next time, so you can know next time we go live. And outside of that, Drew, do you have anything you want to leave the audience with before we shut this thing down?
Nothing I can think of. See y'all tomorrow night. Much love.
Tomorrow night, much love. Couldn't have said it any better. You guys have a great rest of your night. We want retribution. That's how we shut it down every night. We're going to do that again right about now.
Cause we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution.